Would you?
Got it.
Okay.
Everybody go on mute.
Yeah, Tony, just one thing. How do I know whether it's recording to my computer or the cloud? Could you remind me?
It usually asks you when you click record.
Yeah, it didn't, did it though? Very strange.
All right, well, not worry. If it's recording to the cloud, we'll just download it later on.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. All right, well, I think let's crack on. So obviously I'm delighted that Gary and Tim have been able to join us today. I actually met them at the Trin Day David Denton conference in November last year, and I was persuaded to buy both of their books, which I have read, and they did me a deal, and they are both really interesting books. Actually, they're very easy reads. They are page turners. The first one is The Innocence of Oswald, which is very much a book that's focused on why Oswald wasn't the lone assassin. There's some very interesting chapters in here, even for old hands like us that have read a tremendous amount of stuff and do our own research. Some really interesting chapters on the Cliff Murchison party and Malcolm Wallace, Jack Ruby, Roscoe White, strange deaths. I know that some people are interested in that, and Malcolm Wallace, and also the kill zone, which I think is really interesting, and I'm sure Gary's going to touch on that because there's a veritable who's who of potential assassins in Dealey Plaza. When we get to the end of this book, you know, Morales and Sturgis and the French and Malcolm Wallace, Roscoe White. So there's a whole host of suspects that Gary refers to. The second book, Marked for Death, you know, I think it's very much complementary with the first book, and obviously that's a co-authored with Tim, and that's interesting as well because it really focuses on who stood to lose if JFK lived. And it goes through the entities and individuals, everything from CIA, FBI, Secret Service, military industrial complex, big oil, you know, all of the kind of entities that were potentially involved or may have been involved in the cover-up, or certainly at the bare minimum were negligent in certain things. So I would recommend both those books. Just as with respect to the first one, Gary's book, he has updated it. He sent me 3 new chapters actually, and I think that's going to be released in a couple of months. The second edition. So, with respect to today's session, it's going to be kind of loose-ish format. I'd like Gary and Tim to sort of describe their JFKA research journeys and how they got together and collaborated, you know, on the latest book. There will be a specific focus on Roscoe White, which obviously is a little bit flavour du jour again, and it will also be interesting if they could outline their positions on some of the more controversial areas amongst JFK researchers, such as film alteration, Prayer Man, Lunchroom, Encounter, Beverly Oliver, Judy Baker, body switching, body alteration. You know, if there's enough time to touch on some of these controversial issues that do split the community. And the other thing I think we'd be very interested in is, you know, the guys have interviewed a lot of witnesses over the decades, and I think you know, if we can have some anecdotes in terms of, you know, which witnesses you found, you know, most genuine, most nervous, you know, most enlightening, most difficult, whatever, because obviously they've met a lot of people over the years. So, guys, loose mat, you can grab the screen when you take as long as you want. You know, this is your show. If you want to stop for questions at specific times, that's great. Or if you want us to interject, that's great. It's really up to you how you want to run it.
Okay. Well, I blindly, Neil, got started on this as a sophomore in high school. I had to do a report on a president, and I literally drew JFK's name out of a hat. And you know, this was in 1980. It was before the internet, and you actually had to do research, and all you had was microfilm from the library. And I did my report saying Oswald was guilty, but he had an accomplice. And then in 1987, I went to Dallas for the first time and realized that there was no way in hell this happened the way they said it happened. And the first thing I did was I went down to a phone booth on the corner of Houston and Maine and called up Jim Lavelle and went out to interview him. And from that point in 1987, all through the 90s, every time I went to Dallas, I would interview 2 or 3 people. And, you know, over the course of 40 some years, you get to meet a lot of people, obviously. So that's how I became involved with this. And Tim and I have been friends for close to 30 years. And we kind of bonded initially over the JFK assassination because he's the one that said to me back in '94, Johnson was behind it. And initially I didn't believe that, but the more and more research I do, obviously, you know, he was correct.
And I'll just share, I was actually alive when Kenny got killed. Gary was still a twinkle in his father's eye. But I remember, you know, I grew up Irish Catholic. So we knew who John Kennedy was, and we all idolized him. The day he got murdered in Dallas, we were sent home early from school. And at some point during the day, they must have flashed a picture of Johnson taking the oath of office. And I didn't know him from Adam's house cat, as we say in the South. But I looked at him for the first time in my life as a 12-year-old boy and said to my mother, I don't trust that man. And boy, if that isn't a prescient statement coming from an ignorant 12-year-old. So I grew up believing he was involved. And then, you know, 4 years later, 5 years later, his brother gets slaughtered, and you have MLK getting slaughtered, Malcolm X getting slaughtered, and all these things just ringing of some group of people responsible for all these deaths. And I've always believed that. I still believe that. But yeah, when I met Gary in 1994, I believe it was, that was probably 2 days after we met, somehow we started talking about the assassination. And I said to him, well, obviously LBJ was involved. And as he said, he didn't believe me at first. But I think you talked earlier about people being split on certain issues, you know, around the assassination. I think most researchers would not in agreement today that LBJ was absolutely intimately involved in the assassination.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, I was on mute. I beg your pardon. So your train of thought there, Tim, regarding LBJ's involvement is very much ex ante rather than just purely cover up. Would that be correct?
Yes, although clearly he was involved in the cover up, that forming the Warren Commission replete with people who hated Kennedy, number one. Taking over the investigations in Dallas, making sure that the Dallas Police Department, the county, the state would never really be able to conduct a complete assassination independently, knowing that if they did, it would truly expose the people who were involved. As we all know, and again, I think most researchers would agree that the Warren Commission is the best fiction ever written since Grimm's fairy tales. Absolute, it's just poppycock. It's amazing. If there's anybody alive today who believes in that report, I feel sorry for them. I really do, because obviously there are no intelligent brain cells up there. So yeah, Johnson, under pressure, formed the Warren Commission, did everything he could to control and cover up what really happened, because he knew if he did not, he was going to jail.
Mhm. So what about his involvement, ex ante, in terms of some of the minutiae, the execution? Do you believe that there were any direct links there, or was it all done very much at arm's length? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say at arm's length. I think he's the one that was directly involved with ordering the assassination, but obviously they used rogue members of the CIA, military industrial complex, even the mafia. I don't think, except for Mac Wallace, I don't think Johnson had any involvement with who was actually doing the shooting, but he was definitely involved with, covering it up through the Warren Commission. And, it's interesting to note that, Bill Moyers was his aide, and it's alleged he's the one that ordered the bubble top off of the car that day, and he's still alive today and refuses to talk about the Kennedy assassination. Like I said, I think Johnson, ordered it and just let the machinery go, so to speak. He didn't want to know, except for Mac Wallace. He didn't want to know, the shooters, locations, how it's going to be pulled off. But he was obviously alerted to it because, again, in the Auckland 6 photograph, he's already on the floorboard of the car. And even his Secret Service agent, Rufus Youngblood, during his Warren Commission testimony, said when he heard the first shot, he went to cover the vice president. He was already on the floorboard of the car, and said he either knew something in advance or he was one jumpy son of a bitch.
Why, you mentioned in your book that the Secret Service backup car of Johnson's, the door was already open on Houston Street. What's your perspective on that?
I think it was them just signaling to LBJ that, the shit's about to hit the fan, so to speak. Because that car, the follow-up car, started opening its door probably about 100 feet before it turned onto Houston Street. And there's videotape of it, and it's just the door is opening and closing, opening and closing, opening and closing. On, we said, the last 100 feet on Main Street, then continuously on Houston. And before it got to Elm Street, the door was completely open. And whoever was in the back seat was literally holding something up, and it looks like some sort of puppet on a stick or something. I mean, it's like a head figure on a stick, but I mean, that's clearly in the Auckland 6 photograph as well. And I'm sure that with the door being open, I'm sure them pumping up and down, with this stick thing, that was the indication to Johnson to get on the ground at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk about, there's a really good chapter in the first book regarding the get together at the Murchison house the night before. That is really a veritable who's who of incredibly powerful people. And you obviously interviewed. Did you interview Madeline Brown? Did you?
Yeah.
Did you interview? You interviewed
I knew Madeline from the early '90s, and for all the people that want to claim that this woman wasn't credible, she had nothing to hide. She was very credible. Had a illegitimate child with LBJ. Madeline, she knew what she was talking about. And not only that, but even when Nigel Turner in 2003, when he did the other 3 chapters of The Men Who Killed Kennedy, not just Madeline, but he also got other eyewitnesses to the party to admit, hey, this party happened and these were the people there. So you got LBJ, you got Hoover, you have McCone, you have McCloy, who later served on the Warren Commission. The only thing that a lot of people and researchers get wrong is they say Nixon was there, but Nixon was there earlier in the day before the party started. He was there to thank Murchison and Hunt for campaign contributions. They both chipped in, I believe, $100,000 to his governor race in California in '62. So Nixon is verifiable that he was back at his hotel at 10 p.m. So he wasn't at the party, but again, he knew about it because on the front page in the lower left-hand corner of the Dallas Morning News and on November 22nd, '63, it had a column in there that said Nixon predicts LBJ will be dropped from ticket. So, you know, he knew that Johnson was basically going to be going to jail for extortion and bribery. Nixon knew this, and like I said, made it well known to the press in Dallas that day.
Gary, talk about the anecdote, what Nixon said to his aide.
Oh yeah,
This is great.
when you know, Nixon flew out of Love Field right before JFK landed and went back to his apartment in New York City. And 2 days later, when Ruby shot Oswald, Nixon said to his butler or his aide or whatever, he says, "I know that man from somewhere," talking about Jack Ruby. And it's because Jack Ruby was on the House of Un-American Activities in 1947 that Congressman Nixon and Johnson served on. So, like I said, Nixon knew Jack Ruby, way back in '47, and like I said, he was an FBI informant, and most people don't know that as well. So,
Did Nixon say something about? I always wanted the presidency as well, but
Nixon said LBJ, between him and LBJ, they both wanted the presidency. He said, "I just wasn't willing to kill to get it."
It's a great quote. So did you look into the actual comings and goings of that party? Because I guess Johnson would have gone to the hotel in Fort Worth afterwards, wouldn't he? Some point.
Yeah, and it's in the new book, Neil, that LBJ had his first cousin was a guy by the name of J. Burt Peck, and J. Burt Peck looked and talked exactly like LBJ. And I interviewed A.J. Ryle's son, and he said to me, A.J. Riles was the manager on duty at the Hotel Texas that night, and he basically said to me that his father never believed that was Lyndon Johnson that originally came into the hotel that night around 11:30, that it was his look-alike, and that he went back down outside at about 1:30 in the morning, and he had on a gray overcoat and a Stetson hat, and a Secret Service agent was with him, and Riles just thought he was going out to smoke a cigarette, which, he could have smoked in the room back in the '60s. It didn't matter. And he said that like 5 minutes later, he came in with a different Secret Service agent, and he's wearing a tan overcoat and hat instead of the gray. And so, I firmly believe that Johnson went immediately to the party and never checked into the Hotel Texas until about 1:30 in the morning.
So now we have, along with the Oswald double, Marguerite double, we've got a Johnson double as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Neil. Scott, did you have a question? Sorry, Neil, to interrupt.
Yes.
Yeah, Tony, actually, I did have a question, but Gary's actually just answered the question, because when I was over in Dallas and Fort Worth in November there, I stayed at the Hotel Texas, which is now the Hilton Hotel, for a couple of nights, and actually stayed in room 810, which was part of the JFK suite back in 1963. And I was going to ask Gary, because I remember I'm telling that story years ago about interviewing the manager or the manager's son about Johnson's appearance at the hotel or otherwise. But Gary got in there and answered it before I could ask a question. So
Sorry, my research is a little bit ahead of you there, Scott.
You got to be quick, Scott.
I know.
Okay. Well, there's so much to talk about, guys. What about? How about the Secret Service? What? I mean, it's difficult to believe that they were kind of big, conspiratorial wise. You know, on an ex-ante basis, they certainly were negligent. But I mean, someone like Vince Palomaro definitely believes that there were 3 rogue agents in the Secret Service. What are your thoughts in? I mean, obviously, I have read your book, but what are your thoughts in terms of the part that they played in this?
Well, I mean, I think when LBJ went to the Murchison house, you know, obviously Emory Roberts of the Secret Service went with him, and he was a special agent in charge of that trip. And I believe, again, there's no way to prove it, but I believe that, you know, Emory Roberts was notified that night that an assassination attempt was to happen the next day, and he was to do nothing to try to stop it. And I think they probably presented it in the fashion of, you know, this is what's going to happen, and if you have a problem with that, you know, we're going to make sure you don't leave here, you know, alive tonight out of this house. That's the reason why I believe when they went back to the Hotel Texas, I believe that's the reason why Roberts got the Secret Service agents. They all went out drinking that night at the Cellar nightclub and got the volunteer fire department of Fort Worth to guard the president's suite. They weren't concerned with the vice president because he was involved with it. So again, they had the volunteer fire department guard the president's suite that night, and they went out drinking because, again, I think Emory Roberts was given the ultimatum of, this is going to happen tomorrow, and if you want to try to stop it, we're just going to kill you tonight. And that's why he took the Secret Service agents out drinking and so forth, so that they wouldn't be as sharp as they should have been in protecting the president. And, you know, again, the only one that reacted was Clint Hill. And, you know, we've come to find out that Clint Hill's been lying his ass off for 60 years about it now. You know, all the way to the point of claiming he pushed Jackie back in the car, and you look at the Zapruder films, he never touched her. But you know, he's floating his resume that he was a superhero. You know, the only thing that was missing on him was the cape. But
And you mentioned Vince earlier.
Well,
And he goes into great detail and talk about the numerous violations of Secret Service protocol that started at Love Field, began there, and continued egregious issues with Secret Service protocol violations, including changing the parade route at the last minute, having a parade route where the motorcade would have to slow down beneath 40 miles an hour. Yeah. Open windows along. There would never be an open window anywhere along that parade route if the Secret Service was on their game. They were very clearly involved at the highest levels, and there were certainly there were Secret Service people shaking their hands, going, well, "What the hell's going on? You know, this is not the way it's supposed to be." So they were absolutely involved. And I forget. I think it's Ed Castro. What's his name?
Ed Tatro.
Ed Tatro, that says you can't kill the president of the United States unless the Secret Service, the FBI, and the next president of the United States is involved, and they all were.
Interesting point. Gary, you mentioned Clint Hill on the trunk of the car. Can you just elaborate on your views on Zapruder film alteration and Nix film alteration, that kind of thing?
Well, again, we were talking earlier about splitting the community, what people believe, what they don't believe, and everybody that says, well, Robert Groden said the film wasn't altered, and he's the one that released the film, so obviously Groden is crazy because the film had to be altered. Well, that's not what Groden said. What Groden said was in 1969, when he was working for FX EFX in Manhattan, what he said was the version of the film that he got was not altered. Okay, doesn't mean that in the previous 5.5, 6 years that the Zapruder film wasn't altered in one way or the other. I think it's clearly proven that it's altered, because in several images of the Zapruder film after the assassination, you just see a black blob in the back of JFK's head. So I mean, they obviously didn't want to have it be shown that the back right part of his head was completely gone. So it's just a black blob there. But again, the Zapruder film, according to Grodin, the version that he got was not altered. And he took the film from 8mm to 35mm, stabilized it so that the car looks like it's continuously smooth. It's called Grodin scoping now, but he claims that the film was not altered, and a lot of people at that point give him grief about it. But again, he's saying the film that he got in '69 was not altered. But
Right.
Clearly it has been, in my opinion.
Nancy, you've got a question regarding the follow-up car, haven't you? Nancy, still there?
Taking my mute off. Okay, I'm taking my mute off. Yes, I've read or seen YouTube presentations showing that or saying that some of the agents, the composition of the agents in the backup car behind Kennedy is different right in Dealey Plaza at the time of the shooting versus once they get past the triple underpass. What do you know about anything like that?
I have never heard that before, Nancy.
Okay.
At one point I could have told you all 4 of the guys that were standing on the bumpers, but I can't anymore. That's a sign that age is catching up with me. I've never heard that it was any different, on one side of the triple underpass versus the other side.
Okay.
I do know that they were ordered by Emory Roberts to not respond to the initial shots, because again, I think it was Lawson is one of the guys on the right-hand side, the passenger side of the car, went to react to the first shot, and Emory Roberts yelled at him and told him, get back here, to not respond to the shooting that was going on. So that part I do know. Like I said, I don't know anything about the different Secret Service agents on one side versus the other.
Okay.
Wasn't
Nancy-
Lawson in the lead car?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Said wasn't Lawson in the lead car?
Yeah, Gwen Lawson, you're right. Yeah, Gwen Lawson was in the lead car. You're right. And like I said, I just can't remember, obviously Flint Hill, but I just can't remember, who all was on the running boards of the car in the follow-up car. I just can't remember off the top of my head. I know Gwen Lawson, yeah, he was in the lead car with Decker and Curry and Ford of Sorrels. So it might have been Jack Reddy that I'm thinking about that tried to jump off on the passenger side. But again, I just can't remember. I mean, age is catching up to me.
Nancy, there is a thread on the Ed forum that started after David Lifton passed away. I don't know if you've come across that string, which talks about
Right.
all sorts.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's too bad. It's too bad we don't have his research, David's research on that. He had mentioned that to me about a year ago, and had surmised that the Zapruder film was even more altered than we could have ever imagined in terms of what happened with the Secret Service. And I mean, even to the point where he's suggesting that another agent got into the car and had a, what does he call it, a kerfluffle with a Connolly, right, in the car. So I just wondered if these gentlemen had entered that fray and had any knowledge. Not beforehand, of course, but now.
Yeah, it's a complex thread on the Ed Forum. I don't know if you have read it. Have you?
Yes, I have.
sorts-
Yes.
All sorts of shenanigans of people getting in and out of cars and cars stopping, and it's very much out there. That the thought process, absolutely. Okay. All right. What about the mafia involvement? Let's have some minutes on that, Tim, Gary. What's your thoughts there? I mean, obviously you've got some shooters that mafia, but where do you see them in the sort of slightly bigger picture, if at all?
Well, I think the mafia and Joe Kennedy went back, all the way to the 20s. And, Joe Kennedy basically promised Sam Giancana that if he helped get his son elected president, he would basically, have anything that he basically wanted in the mafia, and he didn't have to worry about it. And then unfortunately, after Kennedy's elected, 11 months later, Joe Kennedy has the stroke and basically is rendered speechless at that point. And I think the mafia at that point felt like they had been double crossed. They helped get Kennedy elected, but now his younger brother Robert is going at them tooth and nail. There was 3 times the arrest of mafia figures from 61 to 63 that have been done in the previous 30 years. And I just feel like the mafia felt like, well, we got this guy elected with West Virginia and Illinois, and now we're being double crossed, and which is, by the way, a great book about the assassination. But I just feel like they felt like they were being double crossed, and when the CIA came to them to talk about the assassination, I think they were fully on board at that point, because again, Kennedy didn't go back into Cuba. They didn't overthrow Castro. And that was Castro was the first person that the CIA tried to overthrow that was unsuccessful. Everybody else that they wanted to get rid of and put in their own puppet administration, they were successful with in Guatemala, Iran, so forth. And Castro was one that they were not successful at, and that pissed off the CIA, and like I said, the mafia. They were losing millions of dollars a day in gambling rights in Havana. So I felt like they felt like they had been cheated out of their rights, so to speak, and had no problem with eliminating Kennedy, knowing that they could probably control Johnson more than they could JFK. And again, it gets back to the mafia saying of three people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead, and then the other saying of if you want to kill a dog, you don't cut off its tail, you cut off its head. So
yeah, I mean, I think we know about the mafia's connections with the CIA, of course, right. And therefore they could have been involved at the lower levels in terms of execution. What do you think about Oswald, though, being potentially tied to the mafia with his uncle in New Orleans? What do you think about that line of inquiry?
I don't think Oswald was involved with the mafia. I mean, Dutch Moret was his uncle, but I don't think he shared a lot of knowledge with Oswald. It's interesting that Moret did arrange for Oswald to get his bond and everything when he was arrested for the little street scuffle on August 9th. But I don't think Moret would jeopardize his position in the mafia by telling a 24-year-old nephew what he knew. So I don't put a lot of faith into that, unfortunately, Neil.
That's okay. Just I wanted to address that. How about we move on to the Dallas police? I think we know that there wasn't 600 rogue Dallas police officers, or 1,000 or 1,200. So I think that's clear. We know there's negligence, of course, and we know that they may have had interests to try and cover this up, and to try and remove the embarrassment of this episode. But there's clearly some officers that are real candidates for being, ex ante involved in this. I know you are going to talk about Roscoe White, but what's your opinion on, say, Harry Olsen or Westbrook, Sergeant Hill, Kenneth Croy? How do you view those guys?
I think some of the, higher level guys had advanced knowledge. And obviously Sheriff Decker told all of his deputy sheriffs, you're not to take part in the protection of the president by any means possible. One of the things I found very interesting is, you've got Curry and Decker in the lead car of the motorcade, and as the shots are fired, when they go through the triple underpass, the Lincoln passes the lead car, and the lead car is in the far left lane. Instead of getting off on the exit to go on to 35 to basically Simmons Freeway out to the trademark, they're already on the far left hand side, and are in the process of circling around and going back to not only DD Plaza, but they went directly to the school book depository building. So Curry and Decker had to know in advance that something was happening there. And Curry lies his ass off in his autobiography, which I have, that I think he did in 1970. But he lies his ass off in it and says that motorcycle policemen came up to him after they crossed the triple underpass and said that a shot had occurred to the president. And there's no photographic proof of any motorcycle officer being anywhere near that car, that Curry claims happened. So Curry and Decker obviously knew in advance. And again, I think a lot of other officers, high-level officers, knew in advance. I think Hill knew in advance. The officers that were involved, McDonald and so forth, that that were involved in arresting Oswald, they all knew in advance that this was going to happen, because again, they wrote on his investigative police report, arrest report, that this man shot and killed President Kennedy and seriously wounded Governor Conway and killed Officer J.D. Tippett. This is 70 minutes after the assassination. Why would you write something like that if Jim Garrison said it best in the original Jim Garrison tapes by John Barber. He says, I think certain people had to be involved to get the machinery rolling in that direction before reality actually occurred and any investigation actually occurred. So you had to have some members of the Dallas Police and Sheriff's Office involved to get the machinery rolling, that Oswald's the lone guy and we don't need to investigate this any further, blah, blah, blah.
Just on the timing of the circling around to get back to the TSBD. So are you saying they went on to the lead car went on to Stemmons and then worked its way back?
No, it never got on. No, it never got on to Stemmons. It was in the far left lane, made a U-turn at the next traffic light.
Okay, they just came up Commerce or Main. Okay. Okay. So in terms of the timing of this, they would have been outside the TSBD really quickly. That's what you're suggesting, yeah? Yeah,
and then once they got police officers on the ground there at the TSBD, and they went up the fire escape on the outside of the building, checked the roof. Obviously, officers are inside. That's when, at that point, is when they went to Parkland Hospital. because they arrived at Parkland Hospital at like 12:45 or something like that. But I mean, initially they circled around, you know, from Elm back onto Main. And like I said, not only went to Dealey Plaza, but went directly to the school book depository building. You know, there's several buildings in that area. How did they know that was the building that they needed to be at?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never heard that. I mean, I did read it in your book, but I wonder how they got back there so quickly. Interesting. There is a question from the floor regarding your view, and you do cover it actually in the book, but how Ruby got into the basement at City Hall.
Well, I mean, the story of him walking by Officer Vaughn is a crock of you know what. I think he entered on the east side of the building, and he was there as early as 10 o'clock in the morning. I believe that he went to the Western Union office on either Friday or Saturday, asked them how to send money to somebody, signed his name, and either gave it to an employee of his or another Dallas police officer for his alibi of 11/17 to send money to Karen Carlin. But I think he entered to the east side and either took the steps or the elevator down to the basement level, because again, in my documentary film, there's people that say this man came behind that green car over there and just popped out and shot Oswald. So the transfer was originally scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's an hour and 21 minutes late. Well, Ruby would have no way of knowing that, so he had to be in position at 10 o'clock. So there's no way he could have sent a telegram, wired that $25 from the Western Union office that day. So, I think he was just let in by, another officer or two that, again, knew what was going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, there was this talk about the dog being in the car, wasn't there? That he wouldn't have, wouldn't have done this. He wouldn't have done this because he was a dog lover, but the point being that he was going to be in custody presumably for a considerable period of time, and that was the best place for the dog to be found. That's your thoughts, isn't it?
Oh yeah. He left Sheba in the car, but again, the dog was completely protected, and like you said, so the best thing that he could have done and happened for the dog was to have it be found immediately.
Yeah. And what about Croy? Of course, Croy was just in front of Ruby, and we've got some real issues with Croy vis-a-vis his trip over to Oak Cliff and having lunch with his wife allegedly, etc. Do you feel Croy was very much involved in this to let him through?
I think he knew as well, and possibly was reserving a spot or a place that Ruby could get into so that he could shoot Oswald. I mean, and if you look at the film footage of that day, I mean, literally 1 second before Jack Ruby steps forward into history, Oswald looked directly in his eyes like, what the hell are you doing here? Obviously he gets killed, but Oswald and Ruby knew each other. There's plenty of people that saw them together in his club. He introduced Lee as a friend of his from the CIA to Beverly Oliver. So Croy and Ruby, I mean, they knew what was going on.
So that's maybe is a segue into Beverly Oliver, and I know you know Beverly. What do you make of her story? I know that it was kind of like a serendipitous meeting with Gary Shaw, I think, at church back in the day. But do you firmly stand behind her as a credible witness?
I do stand behind her as credible, and the problem that people have is there was another woman wearing the same colored overcoat and a scarf that actually crossed the street after the assassination. And a lot of people say, well, that's not Beverly, because this woman's, appears to be in her, 40s, and Beverly was 18 years old at the time. So, she gets a lot of grief because of that. But I firmly believe that she was there. I firmly believe her story. Regis Kennedy of the FBI came a couple days later and confiscated her camera and film that she was taking. And the reason why Beverly gave it up is because she had some marijuana in her little makeup case, and she was afraid that she's going to get arrested for that. And so she, gladly gave up her camera and film because she didn't want to go to jail for marijuana. But like I said, the people that have a problem with the babushka lady is the people that have seen the other woman wearing the same scarf, a similar scarf, similar raincoat, that actually crossed the street. And she is much older. She's probably in her 40s. But Beverly never admitted to crossing the street immediately. She said she went over a few minutes afterwards, and that's where she ran into Roscoe White, up near the pergola area, and said that he had on his police shirt, but he didn't have his hat on, and he didn't have his toupee on. So, like I said,
I believe she claims that she saw Patrick Dean there as well. Is that right?
Correct.
And was he off duty as well?
I believe he was one of the 10% that was off duty as well, just like Roscoe, was off duty. It's amazing the people that have an involvement. Miraculously, just had that day off for whatever reason.
I must say the one thing that strikes me about Beverly is that her frame and her sort of the size of her calves don't strike me as being someone who's a girl of 17 or 18. That's where I've always been cynical, to be fair, about that claim. It doesn't look like a very young girl,
right? From
behind. All right. Well, we've touched on Roscoe White, so I think perhaps if we could spend some time. Roscoe obviously features in both of the books that I've read, and there's some great documentation as well, which you show. And certainly Scott and I, and Ryan, we were at Chris Gallup's thing in Fort Worth in November that week, and Gary Shaw obviously did a really decent presentation on that. Could you just elaborate on the stuff that you the claims that you've got there and the evidence behind that vis-a-vis Roscoe?
Well, when I was doing my first book, I went to interview Gary Shaw in his house, and we had probably been talking for an hour or so, and he asked me, he goes, "What do you know about Roscoe White?" And I said, "Well, I think he's the main guy involved." And Gary said, "Excuse me for a second." He goes, "I need to make a phone call," and he disappeared. And Chris Gallup was with me that day, and we were just sitting there, talking about how fascinating conversation was. And Gary came back out and asked us what we were doing the next day. And basically, what he did was he called down to the Pogue Library in Waco on the campus of Baylor. And that's where all of the Roscoe White information is kept. It's kept in a humidity and temperature controlled environment. But I literally had my hands on the cables, the photograph of Geneva with Jack Ruby, the Witness Elimination Program book. They tried to, Ricky found this in 1982. Didn't even take it to Gary Shaw and Bud Finsterwald at the JFKA Assassination Information Center until 1989, and they didn't have the press conference till 1990. And so Ricky had 7 years of soul searching to realize that his father was involved with this. And the media again just portrayed Ricky as uneducated and, you know, looking for fame, looking for money, which was not what Ricky was looking for at all. He just wanted the truth to be out there. And unfortunately, the media, you know, just threw this guy under a bus. And when I talked to Ricky, you know, the guy's as genuine as they come. I mean, he didn't want to be a part of this, but, you know, he had too much evidence to prove that his father was involved.
Does he ever present?
No, he is very private. Lives in West Texas. The last I knew, he lived in West Texas, but no, he doesn't talk about it. I mean, he just got, you know, got thrown under the bus. I mean, Larry King interviewed him, and, you know, unfortunately, the person that threw him under the bus more than anybody else was Harold Weisberg. You know, just, and I'm sorry, you know, Harold did some great research, but I think he was 100% wrong in this field on the Ricky White, Roscoe White connection.
So he gave his diary, he gave his father's diary to the FBI, didn't he? And it was
No, he didn't give it to him. They stole it from him in 1988. They came in and interviewed. He contacted the FBI, and they came in and talked to him and interviewed him. And then, as they were leaving, one of the agents claimed he left his jacket behind, and basically went back into the kitchen area where this evidence was at, and stole the diary at that point. And the diary, you know, never surfaced again, basically. But it was taken by the FBI, and, you know, the problem is his mother, Geneva, tried to duplicate that diary, and that, you know, when she faked the diary, that's all the news media needed as ammunition. That, well, if she's lying about this, what else are they lying about? And basically, like I said, threw him under the bus at that point.
yeah, that's where the credibility was lost, wasn't it? So but Gary showed selected pages of the elimination program journal, and he was looking for assistance actually, and trying to trace a lot of these people. Have you worked with Gary on that at all?
No, I haven't worked with him on that. You know, obviously we've talked about it a lot. But, you know, the most interesting photograph in that witness elimination program book is of Ruby shooting Oswald, and Roscoe White is written at the bottom of the page, setup job, Ruby was brave.
Yeah. You mentioned in one of the books that Roscoe worked with Oswald at Sugi. Have you found any evidence that they actually worked together?
Yeah, I mean they're documented all the way back to 58. They took the same ship out of San Diego to the Philippines, to mainland China, to Japan. They were both recruited by intelligence agencies. They were both in photographic fields. Their job was to analyze the photographs taken of the U-2 spy plane going over the Soviet Union and relay that to our intelligence agencies of the country. So, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that they, you know, that's what they were doing in Japan, was monitoring the U-2 spy planes.
Okay, so you're just, I mean, obviously everything you've described in terms of the journey together and being in the same base, same field, you've just taken that extra leap that they did literally work together.
Right.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Okay, let me just pause for a second to see if there are any other questions that have come through. Are there any other questions? Let's have a look at that. Okay, all right, well, I might as well press on. All right, so what about big oil? Obviously big oil, I think, is your first chapter in the new book, and we know about the oil depletion tax and, you know, what that would have meant. I mean, significantly what it would have meant. How do you see the big players there being directly involved in this?
Well, I think big oil was basically the people that financed everything. They're the ones that paid everybody for the hit, because they were, again, if the oil depletion allowance gets changed, they're going to lose millions of dollars a day. And for someone like, you know, Hunt and Murchison, that are worth, you know, at the time of their death, you know, billions of dollars, you know, paying off rogue agents of the CIA, the mafia, whatever, it didn't matter to them if it was $10 million. You know, that's a day's pay for them. It'd be no different than you and me, you know, giving a homeless person $1 to go get a cup of coffee. I mean, it meant nothing to them. And it secured their, you know, financial status for, you know, generations to come.
Tim, do you have anything to add on
Well,
these guys?
yeah, and so certainly they were irked at Kennedy about the possibility of losing that, but Kennedy was also an advocate of them using better technology, i.e. more costly technology, because at that point, they're drilling in their own backyards for oil, and they knew there's no oil, right? And every time, so they drill, nothing comes out of it, they write it off. That's really what the whole oil depletion allowance was about, because the stated purpose was to let them continue to drill for oil and get these benefits. So there were two strikes against Kennedy from their perspective. One was the allowance itself, and the other was his advocating that they use better, more costly technology, so that when and if they drilled for oil, they would be more successful, have a better rate of success. Always a chance of coming up with a dry hole. But so they really were after him for really two reasons. And these are some of the most powerful people in Texas, not just in the oil community. I mean, they big money, spread it around, paid politicians, paid lobbyists. Yeah, use their influence. These are not people. If you look really at the essence of the book, JFK Marked for Death, these are extremely powerful people at all levels of government, all levels of business, who stood to lose everything they had Kennedy survived. And whether it was help from the World Bank and John McCone, or whether it was the Texas Book Oil who financed it.
Not McCone, McCloy.
McCloy, sorry, yeah. Yeah, somebody paid for it, but whatever they paid for it was a pittance in terms of not only what they were making now at the present time that day, but what they stood to lose on into the future.
I think it was at the Kappa conference in 2019. H.L. Hunt's lawyer was talking. I forgot his name, but
I talked about God.
What's his name?
I know it too. Hell, I've got the
Anyway.
book. I've got the book here.
Anyway, he mentions that Marina visited the office.
Yeah.
Have you've come? What do you know about that?
You know, I just know it from again from that book that she visited his office there in downtown Dallas. You know, I don't have a lot of knowledge of it. I've never asked her about that particular meeting. But God, it's killing me now that I can't remember his name.
John Curlington. John Curlington. That's the name. Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, not many people have interviewed Marina. Tell us what your thoughts are there.
Well, Marina, she's her own worst enemy when it comes to the Warren Commission report, because she would say or do anything to stay in the country. You know, she basically had to go along with what the Warren Commission was saying to stay in the country. But shortly after that, in the early 70s is when she started having her doubts about Lee's involvement. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but Hugh Ainsworth was very manipulative with Marina. He had an affair with her. You know, he's about the lowest form of life that you can get. You know, the only sun that he sees is when a turtle moves its foot, because everything else he's completely in the dark about and lies his ass off about it. But, you know, Marina to this day still believes that he was innocent. And in my documentary film, that's the last person that we have in the film is Marina talking about Lee's innocence and says, you know, I know he's innocent, and, you know, get all the proof out there and put it on the table and show me where he's guilty, because you can't. So,
Gary, doesn't she also mention that it was higher forces in our own government?
oh yeah,
In her closing remarks in that
Yeah.
passage.
yep.
So she's smarter than some people give her credit for. Is my belief.
Yeah.
And do you think she was an agent or a sleeper agent at all?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. You know, she again, her and Oswald were manipulated by the Paynes, by the Mohrenschildts. But I don't think she's an agent at all. I mean, she turns 82 years old this July, and unfortunately, she's a career smoker, and she's got emphysema and COPD now. I'd be highly surprised if Marina makes it another 2 years. So.
Have you spoken to the children at all?
No, she is very protective of them, and actually, her ex-husband, who still lives with her in the basement of the house, he's very protective of Marina. Anytime you call her, he's the one that answers the phone. So, like I said, he's protective of her, and they're both very protective of the kids.
Okay. Have you had the opportunity to interview either Fraser or Ruth Payne?
No, I haven't. I'd love to interview Ruth Payne, but you know, she would just continue her lies, so it wouldn't do any good. I did find it funny several years ago when I went to the Payne House Museum, and the curator of the museum asked me what I knew about the Paynes and the Oswalds, and I told him, I said, well, I could probably do your job better than you do. But yeah, he didn't like it when I you know, told him that the Payne family was full of it, because again, it's in the books, it's in the documentary film. You know, she literally has to step over Oswald's rifle in the basement to get to her wood blocks and her lacquer for the blocks. And, you know, again, she gives more testimony than anybody else in the Warren Commission hearings. And only knew these people for 9 months.
Well, and your theory on this, of course, is that on the morning of the assassination, that she took the rifle to the DPD.
I believe she either took it to the DPD or at least a police officer that she possibly knew. You know, again, that's the reason why, you know, the rifle was, you know, quote, found, even though it wasn't the original rifle that was found on the 6th floor. But yeah, I firmly believe that she took the rifle that morning.
That's the same morning that a witness came forward and said they saw somebody unloading rifles in front of the DPD.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, not on the grassy knoll. Julia Ann Mercer, you know, signed an affidavit that Jack Ruby was parked on the sidewalk on Elm Street, and that they took a rifle out of the back of his truck, you know, up behind the grassy knoll fence area. So, you know, again, I think she delivered that rifle to DPD or you know, possibly the department, but I would say more likely an officer that she knew. She delivered it to him, because again, you know, the media was reporting for 36 hours that the gun was a 7.65 Mauser. And when they couldn't tie the Mauser to Oswald, you know, on Saturday evening around 7 o'clock, it suddenly morphed into a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano. So,
but to be fair, it is speculation, though, isn't it, Gary? I mean, there's nothing you can hang your hat on in terms of her being seen at City Hall.
no, not at all. And you know, it's just like the Murchison party.
Or whatever. But I mean, it's the as you. I mean, you do mention in the book that she did a hell of a lot of grocery shopping around just before and just after the assassination, and
only 4 straight days, Neil.
Yeah, and the trip to the dentist with the kids and stuff, and she was away for a considerable period of time on the day. But I mean, it's quite. To be fair, it is quite a leap to assume that she did that, but it might well be the case because the the consensus seems to be that it was a Mauser that was found.
Yeah.
You know, so
let me ask you, Neil, how many dentist appointments did you have before you were 4 years old?
I don't actually remember much before I was 4 years old. so that would be my answer.
You would remember going to the dentist.
Well, I don't know if I had teeth, but anyway, that's another story. But yeah. Okay. Can I just pause for a second, see if there are any other questions that have come through whilst we no. That's okay. That's okay. All right. Well, let's look at some of the other areas where the community is split. What about the whole prayer man, prayer woman, lunchroom encounter, or hoax lunchroom encounter? Where do you guys stand on this now?
Well, I firmly believe that Oswald was in the lunchroom. You know, again, he was seen by Mrs. Reed. He got change for $1 from her to use the vending machine. And, you know, this was at 12:15. And what most people don't realize is the motorcade was running 15 minutes late. So if Oswald is the lone assassin, why would he be in the lunchroom at 12:15? He would have no way of knowing the motorcade's running late. He would have been upstairs waiting for the car to come by. Yeah, in the sniper's nest. And, you know, he's seen in that same lunchroom, you know, within 90 seconds of the assassination by Officer Baker. You know, I don't get it. I hate to say it, Neil, but I don't get into the prayer man stuff as much as I should have, because I don't think it has any relevance. And it's kind of like with Beverly Oliver. Is it Beverly? Is it not Beverly? Well, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? I mean, she wasn't shooting him. You know, so I don't rely a lot on prayer man. You know, I do find it compelling that, you know, when Captain Fritz asked Oswald where he was at during the time of the assassination, he did say he was out front with Bill Shelley. And so, you know, there's considerable proof that it could have been him standing in the doorway. I know Grodin believes that it was Billy Lovelady. I just, you know, I've seen the shirt that Billy Lovelady was wearing that day. It was like red, black, and yellow, and it just doesn't look like the shirt that is in the image of the Alton 6 picture of Oswald, who was wearing a t-shirt underneath of a brown shirt. It just, that image to me looks more like Oswald than it does Lovelady. But, you know, again, I've been friends with Robert for years. I'm not going to argue the fact on it, you know, to him, but I said, I just don't give prayer man a lot of thought, because I don't think it's relevant.
But I think the argument, obviously, if it is Oswald, then the whole thing is blown apart anyway, isn't it? It's blown open, right? So it's not quite the same as Beverly Oliver. I mean, if that is proven, you know, if we can get the Darnell film or the other film, and it is, you know, a better copy or the original, then obviously that would, you know, that would be it as far as conspiracy is concerned. Obviously, we'd still be working on the other components of it. But so just to,
even if we had a perfect copy of the film, the government would still lie about it and say, well, that was just somebody impersonating Oswald. That wasn't him. You know, they'd lie about it.
but so going back to the other point that you made in the previous answer. So what now the community thinks in the main is Lovelady on the steps, you think is more likely to be Oswald because of the shirt?
I think it looks more like Oswald than Lovelady, primarily just based on the shirt.
But Gary, didn't Shelley testify to the Warren Commission
Yeah.
that he was standing next to Oswald, and then the Warren Commission disavowed his testimony? So, because Neil, you made the point earlier, if it was Oswald on the steps, the whole conspiracy thing is blown to hell. He claimed he was next to Shelley. Shelley testified to the Warren Commission that it was Oswald standing next to him, and they disavowed his testimony. So there you go. I mean, right there, the whole thing is blown wide open.
Absolutely. Okay. And one of the other areas I mentioned very much at the beginning was the sort of the body switching, the body alteration thing. I mean, I personally haven't read Best Evidence, but what's your stance on all that aspect of this?
Well, Gary stepped out, but I'll chat about it for a while. First of all, when Johnson was sworn in, he made sure everybody came to the front of the plane and the entrance to the back was being guarded by Secret Service agents. So nobody could get back to the plane. If anything was going on in terms of switching the body at that point from one casket to another, whatever, the only people that would have known about it were the people that were doing it. I believe that his body was altered on the flight back up to DC. And in fact, that there's a name thrown about as the person responsible
John Liggett.
for the alteration.
Yeah, John Liggett.
Yeah.
I just want to point out real quick, Neil, this is the original negative of the Alkin 6 photograph here. And in the blow up of the Oswald figure in the doorway, this is it right here. And you know, he's got the t-shirt on and the shirt over top of it. And again, Billy Lovelady was wearing a checkered shirt of red, black, and yellow. And this is the pattern of this shirt doesn't match up with what he was wearing. It looks more like the brownish colored shirt that Oswald was wearing. So, you know, again, going back to that, that's the reason why I believe what I do, that's Oswald, is based on the shirt, not the appearance of the face or anything, but, you know, the t-shirt with the V-neck, you know, it's exactly the same as what he was photographed with later on in that day.
There's a picture actually of the three tramps with Oswald, somebody who could be Oswald or Lovelady, in fact,
Right.
Around the bottom of the steps talking to a policeman.
Yeah.
And I think you do mention it in your book as well. So do you have a timing on the photograph of the three tramps? Because that would obviously be very integral to working out whether that could be Oswald or not.
Right. Well, supposedly, according to the Warren Commission, Oswald had left at 12:33. You know, if that is Oswald talking to a police officer, it had to be within the first minute or two. And I don't think, you know, it's impossible from the railroad yard to in front of the book depository building to cover that distance in a minute or two if the tramps were indeed pulled off of a train car. You can't cover that ground unless you're running. And obviously, you know, the older tramp was in his 60s, you know, he's not running anywhere. You know, that picture was probably made at earliest, probably 12:35, 12:36, 37, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, so the Tramps were in the boxcars. Do you know where exactly they were? Were they close to Lee Bower's tower? Is that where they?
Yeah, but they were. If you're looking at Lee Bower's tower, they were to the left of it. Is where they were pulled off. So the very back part of the parking lot would be where they were pulled off of the train.
Near the overpass.
Yeah, near the.
And that's not going to happen in the first 1 or 2 minutes, is it? After the assassination, I mean, everyone's running up the knoll. You've got sheriffs up there. You've got all the cars. I mean, I would imagine that's. I mean, I'm speculating, but it's certainly quite a few minutes before those doors are open and they're,
Yeah, I don't see any way that's happening in the first 5 minutes. So if that's the case, then Oswald is standing in front of the Depository building much later and actually got into the Rambler, like Roger Craig said, at 12:40.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I must say I'm a bit torn on this because you're right on the shirt, but if you look at the guy in profile, he looks more like Lovelady because of the bald patch on his head. So I just assumed it was Lovelady, but of course there's a lot of shenanigans going on amongst the community in terms of where were Lovelady and Shelley post the shots being fired. Because again, people will, they'll believe what they want to believe to fit in with whatever story they've got, whether it's Harvey and Lee, or whether it's Victoria Adams, or whether it's Prayer Man, or whatever. Could we just take a couple of minutes break, just a comfort break, and if anybody wants to get a drink or something, and then we perhaps. I was wondering, have you got a copy of Organ 6 you can show, screen grab and show, not framed, actually on your PC?
Yeah.
Because I think it'd be quite interesting to talk about all the different aspects of that. I mean, someone like Larry Rivera thinks there's 14 different fake issues with that photo. Would you mind getting that up? Would you mind getting that up on the screen whilst we take a break?
Yeah, I can get it up. I don't know how you're going to be able to link into it, but I'll definitely.
Well, all you do is if you just put up the photo on your screen and then screen grab, we'll lose video of you, but we'll be able to see the photo.
All right.
Right. I'm just going to just pop out for a moment. Excuse me.
All right.
Yeah, you can just use screen share screen, Gary, if you get it on your machine.
All right, hold on. Let me find it real quick.
I know you have it.
Yep, there it is.
There it is, right there.
Yeah, interesting comment from Johnny. You feel that Oswald was on the first floor, and that the figure at the bottom is Lovelady. Lovelady and Oswald look so similar.
Yeah, they do. All right, how do I get to the screen share part?
On the bottom of the screen, there should be a button, possibly in green with an up arrow in it, and it's got the word share screen underneath it.
I am not finding anything.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let me share my screen, and then I can show you.
I'm on an Apple computer, so I don't know.
Okay, it may be in a different place. Okay, this isn't very helpful. Can you see here? It says share. Yeah. Well, it says new share on mine, and yours it should say share screen or new share.
All right, hold on. Let me.
It should be on mine. It's on the bottom, but I'm using a PC, so it could be different on a Mac.
Sorry, what are we looking for?
Neil, are you using a Mac, Neil?
I'm using a Mac, yeah.
Is the share screen button on the bottom?
Oh, there it is.
You got
That's
it.
right in the middle of the bottom next to the chat function.
All right, so desktop 1, share. All right, so.
And then you just choose your screen. Click on the screen. It shows the image. Hopefully.
All right.
Can you spot I'm an IT trainer?
Yeah, I'm not having any luck here.
Okay.
All right, share screen. I've clicked on that.
When you click share screen, it should give you an option of what screen that you'd like to share.
Yeah, it says desktop 1, but
Yeah,
it's got an exclamation.
Oh. Exclamation mark. Can you, if you click in it,
Hold on. I'm still trying here. Yeah, I'm not able to get it to share.
Let me have a go. See what you have to do. Share screen. Okay, choose what to share. Do you have a menu of asking you what you choose, what you might want to share, Gary?
Yeah, it says desktop, whiteboard, iPhone, preview, system preferences.
Okay, see, mine is showing me Google Chrome tabs.
Will it allow you to share the desktop, Gary?
Does it say entire
Gary.
screen?
Gary, desktop 1 is your view screen, what you see of yourself, your screen.
Okay, so what do I need to click it on then?
Click on desktop.
That's
Click
what I
on
did.
desktop 1. You see it on
And then
above
click on
desktop
share.
1. There should be a red.
Yeah. Sorry, Joseph, go ahead.
You see desktop 1?
Yeah.
Click that so there's like a blue highlight around it.
Yep.
That should be then on the bottom
Yeah.
right corner that says there's a blue button that says share.
Yep. And it's not doing anything. And then it says open system preferences, which I do, and it never pulls it up.
Are you looking at this on through the Zoom software for a Zoom meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what I share.
I've got the share screen at the bottom. I hit the desktop, I hit the share button, I hit open system preferences, but it never pulls up, what I'm trying to do.
Oh well, never mind. Let's move on if we can't. It's a shame actually, because you've got such a good quality photograph there, haven't you? Okay, all right. Let's see if any other questions came in during that break, or any other statements.
Oh, Tim just came up with a good idea. What if I email it to you real quick, Neil?
Yeah, try that.
Neil, what if we email it to you real quickly?
Yeah. Email it to me and I'll pull it up.
Okay, let's.
I'm just going to pause recording. Okay, so if that comes through, I'll try and grab the screen or send it to somebody. How about we talk about the kill zone, because that's one of your later chapters in the first book, and you really have got a potpourri of who's who involved. Some of whom I suspect you are more confident than others were definitely there. Others may be slightly more speculative, to say the least. But I'm going to read out one of your pages at the end of that book. So you've got Malcolm Wallace in the sniper's nest on the 6th. You've got David Morales on the South Knoll. You've got Roscoe White behind the picket fence, along with Lucien Sarti. You've got on the County Records Building southwest and northwest corners, respectively, Jean-René Soutre and Frank Sturgis. You've got Lauren Hall on the 3rd floor of the Dowtex building, and you've got Charles Nicoletti in the southwest corner of the 6th floor, which obviously we know is a better shot. So there's a whole host of people there. Gary, do you want to just touch on how you got to these villains and who are, in your view, much more reliable, and where you sort of pushing the envelope a bit?
Well, when I did my book originally in 2015, I had Lucien Sarti there, only because my lawyers made me change it from J.D. Tippett.
Yeah.
So in 17, when more files got released that showed that Tippett was possibly a shooter, that's what I have in the newer version of the book coming out. but I put Sartee there just simply because Sartee was known to dress in either military uniforms or police uniforms to blend in basically with authority in that particular city that he was, involved in a hit. So that's why I had Sartee originally there. I have Morales on the South Knoll just simply because from everything that I've been able to research, he was probably the best shot. Him and Nick Luddy were probably the best two shots of anybody there. So if you have a shot going through the windshield from the North Knoll, that's why I put Morales in that area. I put Sturgis on the County Records Building because he was probably the worst shot of everybody there. So, and like I said, I was fortunate enough that I was able to the way that the County Records Building came even into play was I was fortunate enough to see John Connolly's clothing at the University of Texas in Austin, and I was able to measure the angles and so forth of the bullet hole through the jacket from the back to the front. And it was from a left to right angle down 27 degrees. So I literally one night with a laser pointer, literally one night, probably around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, was standing on Elm Street at the time of the first shot and did the angle right to left 27 degrees, and it pointed to just short of the roof of the County Records Building. So that's how I got that into play, so to speak, because again, I don't buy the single magic bullet, or as Arlen Specter call it, his single bullet conclusion. I don't buy that at all.
Okay, there's quite a bit to unpack there. Going back to Tippett, I mean, obviously Maria Tippett was alive then, so you were concerned that the family might kick up a fuss and sue you, presumably.
Yeah, that's one of two things in my book that the lawyers told me I had to change, because Marie and two of their three children were still alive at the time. And then the other thing that they asked me to change was attacking Bill O'Reilly and Fox News, but I have the recording of that showing that Bill O'Reilly's a complete fraud. So I didn't change that because I knew I had the proof on that. You got to realize in October of 2017, when this Theodore Lee informant for the FBI came out and said it was Tippett, that was 2 years after my book had already been out. And so that's why in the new book version of the book, I have Tippett as a shooter instead of Lucy and Sartee in that area.
He was the badge man, right?
Yeah, he was the badge man image.
Okay. So Tippett is the badge man area, and Roscoe White is behind the guys on the steps and on the west side of the running towards the overpass,
Right.
underpass.
Roscoe admitted in his witness elimination program book he was about 8 to 10 feet down the fence line from the west corner. So that's where I have Roscoe at. And like I said, I have Tippett as the badge man.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And Malcolm Wallace. So obviously, given the conclusions that LBJ is very much behind this, I think that's understandable that you would forage in that area. I haven't read the analysis, but my understanding is that Joe Mellon many years ago basically debunked the fingerprint. Do you have any comment on that at all?
I do, and Joe Mellon is great as far as like documenting Garrison and the trial. I don't put a lot of stock into the rest of her work, unfortunately. I think she's kind of very self-serving. There's no reason to doubt Walt Brown. There's no reason to doubt Nathan Darby that the fingerprint was Malcolm Wallace's that was found and finally proven in '98. Like I said, I just, Joe Mellon is great on the Garrison stuff. I just don't put a lot of stock into her other theories on the Kennedy assassination.
I mean, I can't remember what the numbers were, but didn't the fingerprint, and it was your book, did the fingerprint have something like 14 out of 16 matches?
Well,
right?
originally there was 14 matches, and Nathan Darby later found a total of 34 matches. And it only takes 10 matches in a court of law to prove guilt or innocence. So even on the 14, he had enough to prove that it was Malcolm Wallace.
Mm.
And you got to realize too, when this redacted card from Mac Wallace's 1951 arrest of Kinzer, Nathan Darby had no idea who the hell he was talking about. I mean, he was looking at the fingerprint versus his Malcolm Wallace's redacted card from 51. So he didn't know the name. He didn't know, who this person was. He just knew that it was a match.
Mm. Okay. You mentioned in the book that Roscoe White obviously was responsible for the fatal headshot from the front, but you said he missed a shot as well. What's the clarification behind that?
Well, Roscoe thought, and again, in his witness elimination program book, he said he fired twice, and he thought that both shots hit. The only reason why I say that I think he missed and that the throat shot was actually David Morales is based off of an interview I did with Tom Robinson, who was the mortician of JFK. And he said that after embalming JFK, he had to use what he called pancake. It's basically mortician's makeup. And he had to use more pancake in the cheek and neck area of JFK because the embalming fluid was coming out due to glass shards in his neck and cheek area. So in my opinion, that frontal shot in the throat had to go through the windshield so that the momentum of the bullet and the glass coming through would have hit JFK. So I base that entirely off of Tom Robinson's interview about the glass shards. But Tom's been dead for 30 years now, so it's there's no way to go back and ask him again about it. But again, I thoroughly believe that shot came from the south knoll through the windshield. And so
yeah, I think there is that. I think there has been some momentum on that front again in recent years.
Yeah.
South knoll shooter through the windscreen, responsible for the throat shot. I mean, I was always a bit skeptical because I wondered why a professional assassin would do that. But I'm led to believe that you're not going to get the deflection that I thought would happen because of the windscreen.
Yeah, I'm sure he was aiming, right on the forehead, but again, with the angle of the windshield and the bullet hitting it, projected down and hit him here instead of into the forehead area. But Sherry Feaster book is excellent on that point as well.
Yeah, let's. I know Johnny's on the call now, and I'm certainly very much interested in Tippett. And obviously, you've alluded to Tippett being a shooter, which obviously is, that's not completely out of left field. But obviously, Tippett's movements pre-assassination are very, very important. Could you just summarize your perspective on what how the Tippett shooting panned out in Oak Cliff? What kind of the time frame and the course of events? Because there's obviously a lot of stuff you could unpack there.
Yeah. Well, he, I think Tippett's job, besides being a shooter, I think his job was originally to go into the school book depository building and kill Oswald. But because Oswald escaped before he could get over there, I think that made Tippett's life expendable at that point. And, you know, there's multiple stories about Tippett in Oak Cliff, you know, at the gas station, at the, you know, top 10 record store. You know, he's all over the place in that 25-minute window. And again, it's like, you know, Oswald, Lovelady, Beverly Oliver. How do you prove that he was in all of these different locations at, you know, at the same time? I mean, obviously there's a phone call from the record store, but you know, it's too hard to with any validity. It's too hard to prove that he was at the gas station, at a restaurant, you know, at the barbecue joint, at the record store. You know, it's
Well, there were 5 witnesses that probably wrote affidavits to say that he was at the Glocko station,
right.
Before he sped off, you know, like a nutter down Lancaster. So there are 5 independent witnesses there. I mean, he also pulled up the guy on West Davis Street who worked with Roscoe White at the same insurance company. Have you looked into that at all?
I have not.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I think I make reference of it in the oh, there's my wife calling me. I make reference to the fact that Roscoe, you know, worked. I'm sorry, not worked. Lived across the street from the Tippett family after he killed them as well.
Yeah. But your assertion is that, and again, you're not alone on this, but that Roscoe White shot Tippett at 10th and Patton because Tippett didn't do his job at
Right.
the TSPD.
Right.
Johnny, do you have any comments at all? Because I know that you've started the Tippett shooting significantly.
Not really. To be honest, I've kind of just studied this whole case realistically, both of them being separate. I know I know my presentation that was put out by Daily Plaza UK's got a lot of attention. I don't know if you know about that, which is a good thing.
You know what? It's got the most attention of all the ones that we uploaded.
Yeah, it's been attacked quite a bit by these lone nut advocates that I used to have small tete-a-tetes with on Facebook. But
Bill Brown has been very vociferous.
Oh yeah, but then when you challenge Bill, he doesn't come back with anything. I think Bill fails to realise that he needs to prove everything. I don't need to prove anything. You know, the onus is on him to prove that it was Oswald. So yeah, he doesn't come back with anything. So yeah, I mean, the only comment I'll make on the Tippett killing is if Tippett's job really was to kill Oswald and Oswald was in 10th and Patton, Oswald would have been dead because Tippett would have just got out his car and shot him. I mean, police officers didn't need, especially in America today, they don't need any type of reasoning to shoot and kill somebody. So Oswald would have been accosted at gunpoint, Tippett would have killed him, and Tippett would have just made the excuses afterwards. I don't think Oswald ever was at 10th and Patton. I think the physical evidence is very dubious. And yeah, I think if it was Tippett's job to kill Oswald and he had encountered Oswald, Oswald would have been dead. So I think Oswald didn't have anything to do with either crime. I certainly don't think he was right at the bottom of the steps, right in plain view. I think that was Billy Lovelady. But yeah, I mean, this case is, if you look at as I keep on telling people, you got to look at the evidence of this thing. Is the evidence clear that Oswald shot and killed Tippett? Is the evidence clear that Oswald shot and killed President Kennedy? And the answer to that is no in both respects. I mean, you've got major, serious problems with the evidence in both of these cases. The eyewitnesses to the Tippett killing I mean, some say it was Oswald. Helen Markham, for example, well, she said it was the number 2 man, and then she was led to kind of say it was Oswald. But we know the myriad of problems with her testimony. We've also got the testimony of people like, the accounts of witnesses like Mrs. Donald Higgins, who told Barry Ernest that it wasn't Oswald that killed the officer. The witnesses like Aquila Clemens that said it was 2 men that was involved in the shooting and none of them was Oswald. Benavides also, he actually said the man, he refused to identify Oswald as the killer as well. So you've got so many problems with this thing. And I think you cannot speculate on this case. I think Mark Lane said it best when he says, I think that he doesn't like to speculate on this case because all the speculation was done by the Warren Commission. And I think realistically, you just got to stick to what you can prove. You got to stick to the evidence. And today, if there was a serious discussion on this case with both sides, opposite sides of the table, the other side, the loners, couldn't prove it was Oswald, especially beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, can you imagine if this went to trial and you had stuff like the chain of possession of CE 399 being questioned? You had witnesses like O.P. Wright up there. You had witnesses like Higgins and Aquila Clemens and even Warren Reynolds. I mean, Reynolds refused to identify the killer as Oswald, the fleeing man as Oswald. Then he gets shot in the head and then he can't identify him. You know, then you would have had people, then you would have had the officers who took possession of the shells in the Tippett case as well, saying that they marked J.M. Poe said he put his markings on the shells to the FBI, and it says he couldn't remember if he'd done so before the Warren Commission report. But then he told Henry Hurt that he did, in fact, put his marking on the shells. So the shells have no chain of custody either. So, yeah. So, and there's another thing as well. They say Oswald, reloaded, through the shells and then ran away, But who does that? Nobody does it. Also, you would throw the gun. You try and get rid of the gun. Why have you got the gun still on you? And there's so many things that you could say off the top of your head about these 2 separate murder cases. I mean, the foremost authority on the case was Larry Harris. Yeah. And I think he told Jim. I think he did tell Jim DiGenio, in fact, when Larry was still alive, that he thought the shooting was around 108, 109. And I think Larry also got a job as a postman around the Oak Cliff area, so you could speak to like certain witnesses, etc., etc. So, yeah, I go with the whole fact that Tippett was killed before 110, which then makes it even more of an impossibility. Also, you got to ask yourself the question is, if Oswald's destination was always the Texas Theatre, what was he doing in Oak Cliff? I mean, I've been to Oak Cliff. It's quite a bit away from the Texas Theatre. And there's a more direct route from his rooming house. But, the other thing that's always puzzled me about the Tippett killing is this. Why did the police never do a canvass, go door to door and ask witnesses if they had seen this man, if they had seen what happened? They never done anything like that. And that's always struck me as very odd also. They never done a canvass between the rooming house in Beckley and 10th and Patton, knocked on doors and went, did you see this man travel in this area? They never done it. That's not investigating anything. In fact, the first time the witnesses were questioned to the Tippett killing after the fact was in late January when the FBI started showing witnesses pictures, and they only produced one picture and it was Oswald's picture. So they never investigated the killing at all. And if we're going to be honest with each other,
I think it's fair to say, Johnny.
We don't know, actually. I mean, Larry Harris said it himself. We just don't know what transpired at 10th and Patton on the corner.
No, I think it's fair to say that there are so many inconsistencies with this whole flight from the TSBD and what happened at 10th and Patton and then onwards to the Texas Theatre. And I would say that nearly everybody on this call today does not believe that Oswald was there and it happened at that time and he murdered Tippett. But I think what I was trying to get at was, there's a whole host of different potential Tippett killers,
yes,
depending on whose research that you've read. And I just wondered what your opinion was on Gary's view that it was Roscoe White that did it, and the wider point, do you concur that it was because, I mean, he had to go because he didn't do his job in Dealey Plaza? That's what I was really querying.
Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there.
That's
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay, Johnny. It's fine. It's fine.
So, if, in my opinion, I don't know who killed Officer Tippett, but I would say that I know who didn't, and that was Lee Oswald. I don't believe Oswald was guilty of anything. He wasn't guilty of any of the murders attributed to him, and I don't know either. The Tippett killing, I've always had this opinion that the John F. Kennedy murder and the Tippett murder are completely different, are completely separate murder cases, and they should always be treated as such. So, in my opinion, I don't know why Tippett was killed. He could have been killed for a completely different reason. It could have been any reason at all. But it's just speculation as whether he was involved in the Kennedy murder at all, and if he was killed because of the Kennedy murder. I don't know. His actions were very strange, sure, but that's all you can really say. And if you're being truthful, that's all you could really say about it. We don't know why he was killed. We know it happened, but we don't know why he was killed. No. So to kind of sum up my point, I don't know who killed him, and I don't know why he was killed, but I know that it wasn't Oswald that killed him. So,
well,
that's my opinion, of course.
Well, what I'll throw in there is it's Johnny. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, mate.
All right, Johnny. The reason why I put so much faith and validity in the Roscoe White part of killing Tippett is twofold. For one, he admitted that in his witness elimination program book, but he just says, I killed a police officer at 10th and Patton. He doesn't actually say Tippett, but he said he killed a police officer at 10th and Patton. And then the other thing is the extra uniform that was hanging in the back passenger side window of Tippett's car. The uniform was too small for Tippett. Tippett was a fairly good-sized cop, and Roscoe White was only 5'9". So Roscoe would probably wear a size medium shirt. And like I said, the shirt that was found in the police car of Tippett's car was too small for Tippett. And I think it was the Warren Commission that tried to claim that he picked up dry cleaning for another police officer, and that's why, it was hanging in the back seat. I think Roscoe took his shirt off and basically hung it up there after he killed Tippett. But, again, no way to prove it.
As I was going to say, I mean, is there any evidence at all that Roscoe White was at the scene of the crime, that he pulled a trigger? Is there any evidence at all?
Well, I mean, only his own testimony that he shot a police officer at 10th and Patton. I mean, that's in the witness elimination program book. It was also in the diary, but of course the diary was taken by the FBI in February of '88. But again, it's in the witness elimination program book, and I've personally had my hands on that and flipped through every single page. So that I can't imagine. Why would you admit to killing somebody if you didn't?
I couldn't really talk about why he would do such a thing.
And why would Roscoe White move in across the street from the Tippett family afterwards? If no other reason than to just keep an eye on him.
I think, to be honest, there could be 101 other reasons. I mean, I don't think anyone can admit to anything. There's people that have admitted to crimes and then they've never done it. Some people just want fame or whatever. But yeah, unless I've seen some concrete evidence, unless I've seen some witness descriptions that match Roscoe White, I would have to disagree. I mean, if you look at some of the witness descriptions, I mean, Mark Lane did phone Helen Markham. I think it was in the back of what Helen Markham told some members of the press. She said that the man who killed Tippett was short and chunky with bushy hair. And actually, she confirmed this to Mark Lane also. And we also have the testimony of Aquila Clemens, who says that one of the men was short and I think the other one was medium height, if I can remember. Did that match Roscoe White at all at the time?
Yeah, Roscoe was basically the same size as Oswald.
And did he have bushy hair?
And the other thing that I'll say, about Helen Markham, because I interviewed her as well, that woman was absolutely batshit crazy. You could ask her, are you drinking a Diet Coke? Yes, I am. And then 10 minutes later, how's that Diet Coke? Oh, I'm drinking regular Coke. I mean, she constantly changed her story. So like I said, she was batshit crazy. And to her point, she lived to be 90 years old. But speaking of which, Johnny, I'm pretty sure I have a photograph of you as a young child in Lockerbie, Scotland in the late 80s. So, admitting to stuff that you didn't do or did do, you had a Pan Am shirt on. I don't know if that means anything or not.
Well, it might have been in another life because I wasn't born until the 1990s. So.
I knew that was coming up.
That might have been in another life, but a part of me actually feels sorry for Markham, and I'll tell you why. There's a story that Vincent Salandria tells, and he went to interview Markham or wanted to speak to her, and he had Marguerite Oswald in tow. This was in the 60s, and he had went to Dallas, and she was scared. She was scared. I think most of the witnesses were scared, and they just conformed and went along with a lot of what they were getting told. And they went to the door to speak to Helen Markham, and she didn't want to speak to them. She actually told them to come back later at a certain time. When they came back at that certain time, a Dallas police car was pulling away from the residence. And when they knocked on the door, her husband opened the door and basically told them, we don't want to speak to you. We've been told not to speak to you. And apparently Markham was over his shoulder and she was shaking. So you don't know, these witnesses were intimidated without a shadow of a doubt. And she was a screwball. I mean, there's no getting away from that. Joseph Ball called her a screwball during a debate he had with Mark Lane. Wesley Liebler also said that her testimony was worthless. And this is the star witness, of course. But I mean, this is where I approach this case. I approach it as how it would have been if Oswald hadn't been murdered. It would have been the state of Texas versus Lee Oswald for killing Officer Tippett. So I try and evaluate all the evidence. I look at the chain of possession of all the evidence, witness testimony, etc., etc. And I don't think Oswald would have been found guilty. Saying that, you never know what could have gone on. If it was held in the state of Texas, there was a lot of prejudice against Oswald, a lot of fraudulent information spewing out for Curry and Wade and Fritz about Oswald, which was simply wrong. Actually, warranted comment from Percy Foreman, who said that they were actually verging on some sort of the term escapes me, but they were basically what they're doing and what their actions were doing was prejudice. It was like infringing Oswald's human and constitutional rights. They shouldn't have been doing it. In fact, when Oswald requested a lawyer, that should have been it. There should have been a lawyer given to him, and that was that. So I don't think Oswald would have been found guilty, but then again, you never know because of all the kind of fraudulent information that was coming out against him. Who knows? I don't even think he could have gotten a fair trial in the United States. Mark Lane comments about that as well, because of all what was getting said about him. So it's very sad. You know what? A lot of people don't look upon Oswald's murder as a tragedy, but it definitely is. And in fact, if I was the Oswald family, I would have sued the Dallas police for wrongful death, because it's because of the Dallas police that he was killed. If you watch the footage of Oswald's murder, you see there's a formation around him. Fritz breaks that formation, and that allows Ruby to kill Oswald. If Fritz doesn't break that formation, Oswald isn't dead. There was phone calls made to the Dallas police the night before Oswald's transfer, made by allegedly Jack Ruby, saying that there had been a committee formed and we were going to kill him. So there was threats actively made against Oswald's life, and they still transferred him in that way. So
Yeah.
yeah, the Dallas police, it's because of the Dallas police that Lee Oswald is dead, and it's because of the Dallas police that this case has been allowed to stagnate in officialdom for so long.
Well, I mean, I interviewed Jim Lavelle, and one of the first things that he told me was, had we gone to trial on what we had on Lee Harvey Oswald at the time of his death, he would have never been found guilty. And Jim Lavelle went to his grave thinking Oswald was still guilty of something. But Tim and I put it in our second book. Dallas County has had more overturned convictions on DNA than any other county in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
Because if the Dallas police wanted to make a case against you, they did.
I mean, if you look at the Kennedy case, there was definite evidence, in my opinion, that was manufactured after the fact. The paper bag, for example, is one that, in my opinion, was manufactured after the fact. Stuff like the palm print on the weapon, that was manufactured after the fact. What's very strange about the palm print on the weapon is the fact that they didn't take any photographs of it. He never told the FBI. He never told Drain that he had found a palm print on the weapon. He never alerted them to whereabout on the rifle he'd found the palm print. And Vincent Drain actually commented to Henry Hurt that he thought that the palm print was manufactured by the Dallas police because they were getting so much heat by Friday night because they had nothing on Oswald, really. And this is the kicker for me. They apparently, they allegedly claimed that he had tentatively identified the palm print on the weapon as coming from Lee Oswald on Friday night, November the 22nd. However, he claimed that he told Fritz, Curry, and Wade. However, not one of these men mentioned this bombshell new evidence that they had against Oswald. They were releasing all this other fraudulent information against Oswald, but not this key piece of evidence. And the first ever news we hear of this palm print on the weapon was released by Wade on Sunday night after Oswald was dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there was definitely evidence fabricated against Oswald. And as I said about the paper bag, you look at the paper bag and you look at the crime scene photographs, the paper bag isn't there. And scientific tests, which the FBI ran on the paper bag, they can't scientifically link the broken down Mannlicher to the paper bag. It can't be done because there is no oil, there is no creases, there's no nothing. So what is the paper bag evidence of? You know, and this is a very fascinating point also. The only person that we have, the origin of the paper bag in the curtain rod story comes from Beale Wesley Fraser. Okay, now if it went to court of law and Oswald was still alive, it simply would have been Fraser's word against that of Oswald's. So who do you believe? Oswald's been dead since it happened. So this is why the curtain rod story was allowed to flourish the way it has. But there's a lot of problems in it. A lot of writers like Greg Parker, Jim DiEugenio, these type of men, other researchers also have shot so many holes in this kind of curtain rod story. And in fact, if you watch the London Weekend Television mock trial that was done between Spence and Bugliosi, the first witness for the prosecution is Beale Wesley Fraser. That's the first witness. And that's their most important witness. So what does that really say? They haven't got anybody that can place Oswald in the window. Yeah, it's a very weak circumstantial evidence case. And in the book that I wrote for, Case Not Closed, with Dave O'Brien, I studied the origins of the evidence of the Kennedy case. I had done it for Jim DiEugenio's website, Kennedys and King. Also, I've got 3 articles called "The Presumption of Innocence," Lee Harvey Oswald, and I go through all this evidence against him and all the serious flaws in its evidence. But yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Johnny. Gary, I wanted to just press you on the Roscoe White thing. In the book, one of the books, you say that, you know, he told Geneva the night before that he was going to do this, and he was under tremendous pressure because he thought he'd be taken out, his wife would be taken out, his children. Where did that story come from? Where did that evidence come from?
Geneva told her son Ricky about it. when Ricky found the contents in 82, like I said, he didn't turn it over to Gary Shaw until 89. So for 7 years, he did his own research, and Geneva admitted to Ricky that he told her the night before that he was to kill the president, and she said something in the fact of, you can't do that, and he goes, well, if I don't do it, they'll kill us, they'll kill our boys, and obviously, the government knows more about the situation than we do, and he was basically just following orders at that point. Geneva said that she eventually went to sleep, but she said that she didn't think Roscoe ever went to sleep that night, that he just faked sleeping to act like, that he could get past it. But yeah, that story came directly from Geneva to Ricky. And, when I talked to Ricky in the late 90s is when he told me about that.
And that's how Ricky resolved his angst over his father being the assassin, in light of all he was doing was A, following orders, military guy, you do what you're told, and B, the whole family would have been threatened had he not followed orders.
Okay, so the tragic death of Roscoe White, do you buy into this as a as a bizarre accident, or
No,
there's not something nefarious there?
Oh, there's definitely. I mean, again, based on talking to Ricky, he believes that Roscoe was asked to eliminate Nixon and refused to do so. And that's the reason why he thinks that his dad was killed, is because he refused to try to assassinate Richard Nixon. So I think the chemical fire is very suspicious. He supposedly took a break and then came back in to the welder's table or whatever, and lit the soldering iron or whatever, and there was chemicals underneath of it, and it basically exploded. He admitted to his pastor, on his deathbed, that he killed JFK, he killed a police officer at 10th and Patton, and he also admitted to killing 28 other people to cover up the assassination of JFK. And when I interviewed Jack Shaw, pastors, priests, doctors, lawyers, they have this unwritten rule that they don't have to say anything. But when I asked him about the 28 other people that he supposedly killed, Jack Shaw said to me, that number sounds about right. So he didn't deny it, he didn't confirm it, but when he said to me that that number sounds about right, it was all the proof that I needed that Roscoe actually said this to him.
Mm. Yeah, you'd think he would have paid his dues if he killed 28. Why force him to kill Nixon? But yeah, you also mentioned in the book, one of the books, that Ruby killed Oswald on Campese's orders, and then above that, Joe Civello. Where did you get that information from?
From directly from Vicky Campese, Joe's daughter. She's still alive. Joe died in 1990, December of 1990. But I get that information directly from the Campese family.
And they were quite put up to talk about the sort of mafia history. They were quite happy to do that.
Oh, no,
it is odd. It is odd, isn't it?
No, they never talk about it anymore. And it's too big of a conspiracy, and Dad did stuff for the mafia, but he was never a mafia member. Sorry, he was. Him and his brother. Yeah, it's I get that information directly from Vicky Campese.
Because they seem to sort of relish in it. in a way. I mean, I haven't been there, but I know several of you have been there for dinners with a whole host of other JFK researchers when all these conferences occur. So, you know, it looks like they sort of kind of like the publicity, if you like.
Well, I mean, they like the money, obviously, but I started doing the Thursday night dinner back in 2014. I'm actually the one that started that with everybody. But like I said, the Campisi family, you know, they're and even the manager at Campisi's, you know, they're very nice people to me, have always treated me well. And like I said, I got that information directly from the horse's mouth, well, the horse's daughter's mouth, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Gary,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts on the cigarette butts, footprints on the hoods of the cars that SM Holland and the rest of the railroad men encountered on the behind the picket fence after the assassination? And why do you think that these butts weren't taken into evidence, or the Dallas police ever photographed these footprints in the mud and on the hood of the cars, or car, should I say?
Well, the reason why I think that they didn't take it into evidence is because, again, I think Jesse Curry, Decker, Fritz, and several of the, you know, lead investigators, I think they already knew this is your man. You know, Lyndon Johnson even called Captain Fritz and said, you know, you don't need to investigate this any further. You've got your man, Oswald. So I don't think, you know, I don't think they took any of that into evidence, because they were already under orders that this is the guy that we're going to, you know, set up and frame as being the killer.
So do you think Jesse Curry, Fritz, and a lot of the members of the Dallas police knew the president was going to be murdered?
I do, absolutely. Because again, you know, if Jesse Curry is supposed to be the lead car, why isn't he in the right-hand lane going on the Simmons Freeway after the shots are fired? Why is he already in the far left lane and turning around to go back to Dealey Plaza? You know,
I know Jesse Curry said a really interesting thing to Peter Dale Scott. He said that we never could place Oswald in that building with that weapon in his hand.
right.
So that's quite a big omission from someone who had prior knowledge of the president's murder. To say, I think that was in the 1970s, was it? Have you seen the footage?
Of what?
Of Peter Dale Scott interviewing Jesse Curry in Dealey
I
Plaza?
I have not. I know that Jesse Curry did his book in 1970, because I have a signed copy of that. But I haven't seen the interview with Peter Dale Scott interviewing him. But
Yeah.
I mean, he even admits in his autobiography that, you know, that they don't have any proof Oswald was in the window. They have no motivation for Oswald. He says that clearly in his autobiography. But his autobiography also says that, you know, a motorcycle cop pulled up to him and said that shots were fired at the president, and that's why he turned around. And there's no photographic evidence to show such a thing. So
Yeah, I think Jesse Curry also didn't believe in the single bullet theory.
no.
Which is quite interesting, because again, if Oswald was permitted to stand trial, you'd have had people like Nellie Connolly and John Connolly testifying that the single bullet theory is not possible.
Well,
Because
I even debated Arlen Specter in 1993, and you know, he claimed he couldn't remember his single bullet conclusion. And I explained to him, I said, well, would you like me to explain it to the people in the audience? Because I wasn't born yet, but I know it. You know, Specter got up and walked out. You know, again.
we know that 3 members of the commission didn't believe it. Richard Russell, John Sherman Cooper, and Hale Boggs didn't believe it. And in fact, I think the first one to actually was alerted to I think his objections not being taken was Russell, was it? Because Harold Weisberg alerted him to that, and then he came out publicly and said so. So not even the members of half of the members of the commission believe the single bullet theory.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
And
and I've even got it in the second book, a conversation that Russell and LBJ had, and Russell admits, I can't sign off on this because I don't believe it. And through some clever rewriting of the words, Boggs and Cooper and Russell signed off so that they had a quote unanimous decision, but that was all just done through the wording of the Warren Commission report. Because like I said, Russell never believed it. Cooper never believed it. Boggs never believed it. And we know what happened to Hell Boggs.
yeah, he disappeared, didn't he?
We don't know what happened to him or the plane. Yeah.
Yeah,
Something
he came.
happened.
He's
Gary, can I just-
he's down on my lanai right now.
Gary, can I just ask you about the? Obviously, it's come up before, but in one of the books you mentioned that several employees were missing at the roll call from the TSBD. It wasn't purely Oswald. I think we know that Charles Gibbons wasn't. What other employees do you know of that weren't there?
Oh, I don't have actual names. It's just that they did their lunch there in 3 different shifts. They did a 11:30 to 12, a 12 to 12:30, and a 12:30 to 1. And obviously, not everybody, packed a brown bag lunch. And there was over 100 employees at the school book depository, not counting the people that were refurbishing it. So on the roll call, there was, I think, 6 or 7 people that weren't there, either from the 12:30 slot, the 12 to 12:30 slot, or the 12:30 to 1 slot. That they weren't there because they went out for lunch. But again, the Warren Commission makes it look like, well, Oswald was the only one that left. Not the case.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Something that we could perhaps ask Fraser about the different lunch shifts.
Here's something that's quite interesting about that. If the second floor lunchroom encounter is indeed what happened, why did the Roy Truly have such a reaction to Oswald being missing from this warehouse employee roll call? Because what we're led to believe is 90 seconds after the shooting, Truly and Baker encounter Oswald on the second floor lunchroom, and Truly vouches for Oswald to the police officer. So Truly knows that Oswald wasn't missing after the assassination. He's seen him, he vouched for him, and then in the space of 20 minutes, 20 minutes later, he's saying he's making this big scene that, Oswald was missing. So it doesn't make any sense. If he did encounter him after the assassination,
it was actually later than that, Johnny. It was I think it was 1:18 is when Truly noticed that Oswald was the only one that wasn't there.
So less than an hour, less than
an hour, but obviously back from the lunch break of 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So after 1 o'clock, he's the only one that's not there at that point. And personally, I don't think Truly made that big of a deal of it because, again, after the assassination, they let everybody go home. I think at like 2:30 that afternoon, anyhow, because nothing was getting done. I mean,
well, didn't Truly not phone the other supervisor or another member of staff and ask if Oswald was over there, and then he told Fritz. So this is a very strange reaction to me, because let's be honest, if you're vouching for somebody 2 minutes after the killing, then you're not going to think that they're involved in it.
Right.
Charles Gibbons was also missing. I mean, I think the whole roll call thing, it has been debunked. I mean, I think that at best it would have been an informal head count of the warehouse employees, because Caroline Arnold, for example, was outside the building and she never got let back in. A lot of employees were outside the building and actually didn't get let back into the building because the police had sealed it off eventually. So if there was a roll call of all the employees, then there would have been quite a lot missing.
Yeah, and again, I think that's all staged bullshit. Just like the bus transfer ticket. It's all staged bullshit. I don't think any of that happened.
No, agreed. Gary, could you just a couple of personal anecdotes? Could you talk about the FBI that were all over you, pressing you for that? They thought you had a photograph from the overpass, looking to, and we know, of course, it was TV program footage. And also, could you mention the ring as well, please?
Well, the photo, I got a phone call from the FBI in September of 2016, and they said, you have a photograph in your book and a document in your book that's never been released to the American public, and they wanted to know how I got it. And so the photograph that you're talking about was on, I think, page 15. But what it is, it's a recreation of the assassination scene when Stephen King did his series 11/22/63. Nick Shelley, who owned the Lincoln replica car, told me, "Hey, you might want to come out to Dallas because I'm filming this, and you might want to get pictures and video for your book." And so that's just a recreation, which tells me that the FBI has that photograph somewhere.
The actual photograph.
The actual photograph. And then as far as the ring,
that's the photograph in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see that? Yeah.
And then as far as the ring goes, Tim and I purchased the ring 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
3 years ago from Marshall Evans, and it's a ring that Lee Harvey Oswald was buried with for 18 years. And when Marina had his body exhumed in October of '81, she wanted the wedding ring back, and Paul Grudy was the mortician that had to be there at Baylor University Hospital when they did the second autopsy, because he had to verify that this was the clothing and the jewelry that he put on Oswald. And so he took the ring to Marina and gave her the wedding band. He actually gave her both rings, and she goes, "I don't want that ring." She goes, "He bought that in the Soviet Union before he met me." And so he just stuck it back in his pocket and was going to put it back on the corpse. But the problem was his casket was so dilapidated, they ordered a new casket and put his remains in it and sealed the casket before Paul could put that ring back on his finger. And Paul held on to that ring until 2005 and gave it to Marshall Evans. And like I said, we bought it in 20.
Okay. Have you got it? Can you show it to us? Is it handy?
Yeah. I'll go grab it real quick.
I'll tell a quick story about the FBI phone call. So Gary's phone rings. He doesn't know the number. He doesn't answer it. Then they leave a message, call us back. So he calls the number back, and whoever answered the phone says, "Well, who is this?" Gary says, "You called me." Without identifying himself. And if you know Gary, that's so Gary.
Yeah.
Who is this? Well, you called me, funny, but that's when they got in the conversation about that. And Gary's right. If they're claiming he has a photograph that was never released to the public, obviously they have the photograph that was never released to the American public.
Funnily enough, in that Kappa 2019 conference, the guy from Time or Life, and you'd know his name, something like James Vandenport or something like Vandenkopf or something like that. He showed a photograph of Jackie on the trunk of the limo from the underpass, and of course, there's no way that wasn't a genuine photo. That was from one of the, whether it was from the TV series Jackie or LBJ or from one of those things, but it was slightly disingenuous.
Yeah,
That would be the ring there.
There you go.
And I've got all the paperwork on it. It's just a calligraphy L is all that it is.
It's available to the highest bidder. Just kidding. What did now the wedding ring did sell?
Yeah.
for $85,000.
118,000.
180, and that was how long ago?
2000, I think 4.
Yeah.
Let me go get my charger.
Okay.
Greg Parker's got a really good article on Kennedys and King about the ring on the 6th floor, which is allegedly the ring that Oswald left, his wedding ring. It's very good. You should check it out.
I never heard that story about him leaving the wedding ring. Yeah, actually, I think I did hear that story.
Yeah.
In Irving, he left it in the bedroom in Irving. That ring.
Yeah, well, apparently, but it's on Kennedys and King. If anyone just types Greg Parker and Kennedys and King, it comes up. Really good.
Did he
Really
left
good.
the ring in the sniper's nest?
No. It's just
Oh.
about the authenticity of the ring, which is in the 6th floor museum today. It's very good. Greg does great work.
What's their stance that it is or is not the ring, the real
No,
ring?
it's not. No,
It's
it's very
not-
good. Yeah, you should. I've not read it for a good while now, but it's a very good article.
Have you heard that it's not the real ring?
Well, the problem is they tried to make up this bullshit lie that the ring was in an attorney's office for 50 years before it was found. That it was basically used as collateral for Marina to have an attorney. And the guy that came up with that bullshit story is Joe West. And Joe West was one of the original planners of the school book depository building. What they don't want to tell you is they claim they're a nonprofit, yet they make $10 to $12 million a year, and the federal government gives them $414,000 a year for funding. But Joe West is the one that came up with that bullshit story about the wedding ring being in the attorney's office for 49 years. Like that, I don't buy it for a minute, only for the fact that I knew Paul Grudy. I've got documentation on the ring from several eyewitnesses, and Paul and Virginia Grudy were very religious people. There's no way this guy would lie about that ring. Marina sold the ring because she wanted the money.
I'm talking about the wedding ring in the Texas School Book Depository.
Yeah, that's what
you're talking about. Well, that's a good article. You should. I don't know the ins and outs of it off the top of my head, but I can remember reading it quite a while ago and being quite impressed by it. So it's quite good.
Yeah, I've got a copy of that article. It was in the Texas Monthly magazine, and I've got a copy of that at my house in Atlanta. But like I said, that whole story about the wedding ring being in an attorney's office for 49 years is bullshit. Like I said, they made that up basically to hide the fact that they bought the ring from Marina and they needed a good story for it.
That ring that you showed with the calligraphy L, I've held that ring. Marshall Evans showed me that ring in 2018 on the Knoll. So yeah, very interesting.
Yep, that's it right there.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know Marshall Evans. What sort of research did he do, guys?
Marshall was Robert Grodin's assistant for about 20 years. He would be the one that would do the majority of the talking on the grassy knoll, and then they would sell Robert's books and videos up there. And Marshall wrote his own book a couple years ago, and unfortunately he has liver cancer right now, and not going to be long for this earth.
Right.
But
he knew Paul Grudy as well.
Yeah. Marshall knew Paul Grudy and would actually go visit him in Austin. And when in 2005, when Paul Grudy gave Marshall the ring, it was the only time that Robert Grodin went with him. And he always said to Marshall was, I've got something I want to give you. And when he gave him the ring, he told him the story of how he came in possession of it, and told Marshall, while me and Virginia are alive, you can't talk about this ring or how I came into possession of it. But, you know, after he passed away, Marshall was allowed to do so. And because Paul, when he had the ring in his pocket, he was just going to go out to the gravesite like a week later and dig down a foot or two and throw the ring in the ground and cover it back up. And Virginia says, you know, you can't do that, because if they catch you digging at a grave, they're going to go to prison for a grave robbery. And so that's why he held on to the ring for as long as he did.
Is Rose Hill still, when I went to Rose Hill to Oswald's grave in 2018, and I was told that they will not tell you where it is. They don't want the publicity. And in fact, if you go in and ask where Oswald's grave is, they'll call the cops on you, apparently. I don't know how much that's kind of true, but I remember being told that when I got there, because there used to be Oswald's grave, and then there was an unmarked grave next to it, and then there's a Heidel plaque just down from the grave as well. But
Well,
yeah,
the Heidel plaque has gone.
oh, has it really?
Yeah,
And
I mean, I visited the grave in November with Ryan. I think Ryan still on the call, but and he did an article about the grave in one of the DPUK magazines, and there's a very amusing marker next to Oswald, and I'm having a mental blank.
Nick Beef.
Yeah, it was Nick Beef.
Yeah, that's right.
And that headstone, Nick Beef, there's nobody buried there. And the person that owns that grave site is a guy by the name of Patrick Aberdeen, who lives in New York City. And I've got Patrick's phone number here. But he did that because, again, the funeral home that's out in front of the cemetery that manages the cemetery wouldn't give anybody information where Oswald's grave was. But if you asked where Nick Beef was, they would give you that information. And, you know, that's how you would find Oswald's grave. When I first found the grave in the late 80s, Patrick hadn't put that headstone there yet. So it was a real pain in the ass to find then.
Right.
Isn't Marguerite buried next to him in an unmarked grave? I read that.
On the left-hand side.
Yeah, left-hand side, Marguerite is buried there.
Yeah, and I tried to purchase a headstone for her, and even got Marina's permission and her to sign off on it. But again, the funeral home refused the notarized document from her because Lee's brother Robert is the one that actually purchased the gravesite for his mother. And so I have to have something from Lee Oswald or his wife Beta or their kids, and they will not talk to me about it.
Does Oswald's family engage in any type of discussion about this case? I mean, I'm assuming both his daughters are still alive, Rachel and June. I mean, don't they want to see their father's name cleared of this? I mean, there's enough evidence to do that. I mean, they must be living with the stigma of the assassination for nearly 60 years now. Surely they
Rachel was a big advocate of it around the 30-year anniversary. She went on Larry King Live and several other shows, just saying, if you've got the proof, show it to me, because all the proof that we have says he didn't do it. But they're like most other people. They've just given up. It's been 60 years now, and they realize that nothing's going to change in their lifetime, or ever. Yeah. So.
I think if there was going to be anything that did change, though, they have the power. They would have the power to really drive that, because they're his family. If they endorse, and I'm not just saying like endorsing a theory or a specific theory. I mean, if they were really serious and says, well, if you look at the evidence, and the evidence has been well documented, the problems with it, my father's innocent. So, like, if you either prove that he killed President Kennedy or Officer Tippett, or we'll sue you if you print it. I mean, at 10th and Patton, there's a plaque at 10th and Patton that says Oswald killed Officer Tippett. That's factually incorrect, because he never stood trial because he was murdered, so he was never found guilty. So how can you say that the man is guilty if he's never been found guilty in a court of law?
Exactly.
Well, you know who paid for and wrote that plaque?
City Dallas?
No, retired FBI agent Ferris Rickstall III.
Ah, right, okay, yeah. Yeah, I've seen this guy.
He's the one that paid for the plaque and did the wording on it. So again, how did he get? And because the plaque on the TSBD says allegedly, yet the one at 10th and Patton said he murdered him.
Yeah.
Gary, can I just ask you, and also I'd like perhaps Nancy to come in here as well. You touch on George de Mohrenschildt in the first book, and you talk about him being a contract CIA agent, and recent documentation that is evidence of that. I mean, I don't know if you know Nancy, she's written a significant book on de Mohrenschildt. Can I get you two together to talk about your respective views on that?
Oh, sure. I don't care. She's probably a lot better expert at it than I am.
Because Nancy, my understanding is you think that he was just I might be wrong, but my understanding is you think that he was just debriefed every time he went abroad on business trips. Is that right? By the CIA?
I think that's part of it. He wasn't a contract, in my opinion, and based on the research, he wasn't a contract agent in the CIA with active duties. He was an informant. And so he, whether it was on the Russian community or when he went abroad on trips, or even when he traveled domestically, he would report back to J. Walton Moore about what he had observed, et cetera. And we have some of his actual written up reports from when he went to Yugoslavia and spent a few months there. And, they don't contain any earth-shattering information that would have saved us from getting into World War III or anything like that. But he does talk a lot about the culture of places. And when he went on his south of the border walking trip for over a year, he wrote a tremendous diary that indicated all of the things that he had seen and experienced on that trip. And so he's the kind of person that is always looking for a way, in my mind, to parlay something that he has into a monetary situation. So if he can monetize a relationship with you, it's going to happen. Now, he wasn't a good businessman, so lots of times those things fell through because he didn't have that acumen to do that. I also don't think he had the acumen to lead anybody, to influence anybody into a certain behavior. So I don't believe that he influenced Oswald significantly, especially in terms of any violent interaction with Walker or the Kennedy assassination. But he's a squirrely enough character and a bigger than life personality that he's a prime person to pin all kinds of stories onto about what his involvement might have been. But Oswald came back to Dallas in June of 1962. He didn't actually meet him per se for almost 3 months. And his meeting with Moore, the CIA agent in Dallas, wasn't until July, like a month later, after Oswald had come back. And so it's a long time to wait. And if he's being called the handler of Oswald, what was going on for those 3 months? Because those are pretty pivotal about the guy, alleged defector, coming back, and what were his instructions at that time? What was he supposed to be doing? So I'll kind of throw that out there as just a talking point for reaction and response.
Well, my part with de Mohrenschildt relates more to spring of '63, because that's when I feel that de Mohrenschildt became actively involved with Oswald, is in April of '63.
And the Paynes, right?
And the Paynes, yeah. Mostly Ruth Payne, because again, they were split up at the time. But you know, Mohrenschildt is definitely an interesting character. You know, the fact that he was a member of the Dallas Petroleum Club with you know, George H.W. Bush. You know, he's got intelligent ties, you know, going back for years. And, you know, to your credit, Nancy, I mean, he probably was just an informant, not an actual CIA agent, because I know that he applied for the CIA early on, like in 51, 52, and was turned down because he wasn't born in the United States. So yeah, the informant part, when I say he was a contract agent, you're more correct that he was probably an informant instead of an actual agent. But like I said, he just had too many connections, you know, with Oswald, with the Paynes, and people don't know this, and we put it in our new book. You know, the Paynes acted like they were a very middle-class family, and they were not. Michael Payne in 1960 inherited $269,000 from his grandmother, which is the equivalent of about 2.3 million today. So they act like they were very middle class and not well-to-do. You know, he was just an engineer with Bell Helicopter. Well, he was an engineer with Bell Helicopter because they were a CIA front company, and his stepdad is the person that that basically developed the helicopter that was later picked up for Indochina usage in Vietnam and so forth. So, you know, they were very well to do and had a lot of big contacts, even though they acted like they were very, you know, very vanilla, plain, you know, working class people. They were not.
Okay, let me just, oh, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. Do you believe that Mohrenschildt killed himself?
Yes, I do believe he killed himself. I've listened to the tape of that was being recorded because Nancy Tilton, who owned the home, was having a tape recorder of a daytime soap opera, right? And so I've listened to that tape completely. I've interviewed Alexandra de Mohrenschildt, his daughter, several times. So I believe that he actually put that gun up to his mouth and shot himself. But I also believe that he was driven to complete almost insanity and paranoia by the time he did that. So between Willem Oltmans and the pending situation of a possibility of having to go before the HSCA, which he did not want to do, that all culminated in that happening that day. And the interview with, you know, Epstein that morning just further aggravated him. He got paid for it, and his longtime friend Sam Ballin had helped set up that interview to happen, to be able to get de Mohrenschildt some money, because he was very strapped. I mean, he and his wife had been living at student housing at a black college in South Dallas. So in terms of Dallas society, that was about as low as he could have sunk, from a man, like you say, who had, you know, lunched at the Petroleum Club and the National Building and eating on the penthouse floor and that. But, you know, to that connection, they, those people, those rich people, they thought he was a joke, a complete joke. Okay. He tried in the spring of '63, he was trying to get them to invest in his big Haitian opportunity that he had. And he couldn't get a nickel out of these people, whether it was, you know, from the rich people in the Russian community like Paul Regoratsky, or you know, Murchison. I mean, he was writing to everybody in Houston and Dallas trying to get them to invest. They just completely blew him off. So he was a joke to them. And I think that who would trust a man who can't keep his mouth shut? Okay. I mean, he was very charming. He was very sophisticated, but he couldn't keep a secret for anything. And so the thought that someone would entrust him with something of this nature he's certainly not a shooter. And then he ends up, before Oswald went to New Orleans, he leaves the country. He and Jean leave the country and go to Haiti. So, he's a funny kind of a handler when he doesn't go to meet him for 3 months after he gets back. And then he's not the one getting him the jobs. It's George Bouhy in the Russian community who got him the job at Jaeger's Charles Stovall. So, George gets thrown in as kind of the scapegoat in a lot of things. And I tried to trail all those things down to be able to understand the rationale or the reasoning behind certain activities on his part. I think I know him pretty well, even though unfortunately I never was able to meet him. But I have interviewed so many, literally hundreds of people, business associates and friends and family, that I have a pretty clear cut of the guy, I think, at the time that I wrote the book, which again took me over 30 years to put together. And I finally got it out there because my husband threatened me that if I didn't do it and I didn't stop the researching, which is, as you know, perpetual, because every time you write something, another document comes out and you go, oh, I see, and finally he got me over that fear to be able to publish and get it out there. But I think that I think George has been really maligned, and it's very easy to do that.
When did you publish it?
Let me ask this, Nancy.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Nancy. When did you publish the book?
2014, I think.
Okay. And has there been any documentation that's been released since that would get you to update it in any fashion?
Yeah, there is some, but nothing that changes my basic conclusions on him. But it can augment some of the situation. I was really fortunate to talk to Sam and Ethel Ballin. They lived in Santa Fe, and they were probably the closest friends of George de Mohrenschildt, who stuck through him through thick and thin. And Sam was also in the geology field. And he was very frank about George. He had no delusions about him, but he did have the original of George's diary that he had kept on the walking tour. So I was able, I went and stayed a week at the La Fonda Hotel, and I was just poring over that thing. And Sam and Ethel gave me many hours of conversation and discussion of George, about George and Jean. And reading those details in there, he had two things that he wanted to accomplish from that trip once he got going on it. One was to identify all the geological elements that he possibly could to come back and parlay into some business opportunity. And the second thing was he was a great admirer of the different cultures of the world and the different languages of the world. And so as he went through Central America and Mexico all the way to the Panama Canal, he immersed himself into all of these different areas. Jean was picking up things to do with textiles and that, so that she could use natural plants and et cetera in her designs and in her colors and her dye making for the fashion industry. He was looking at culturally how people lived, and also how governments were manipulating people. And so when he came back, that's when he started writing to the President Kennedy and the Department of State, asking them, do they want to buy his book, buy his manuscript, because he can tell them about everything that's going on down there in Central America, because he saw how the big companies were taking over the geography of the regions and completely dominating it. And so I think that he got the door shut in his face. So if he was, on some mission down there, like, to think about that, he would be the one to go and train people or give them information for the Bay of Pigs training, the exile training down there. I mean, he was traipsing through the forests of Mexico for a month before that occurrence. And who would wait for someone? I hope he gets through. Okay, he had a donkey and a dog and his wife, and that was all that they had. So yeah, I've done a deep dive into George de Mohrenschildt, and I cannot buy him as a handler of Lee. Certainly, okay. They had a lot of political discussions.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, as someone that's listened to the audio recording as well, you don't, you believe that George killed himself, and obviously he definitely could have been at that stressful point, because again, he wrote George Bush of the CIA, and Bush responded back, basically helped me in the position that I'm in. But, on that tape as well, I mean, you hear the alarm go off that somebody is coming into the house. So you don't think that he could have been murdered?
No, because there were other people in the house. There was there was a maid, there was a cook, and there was a gardener. So all of those people are moving around in and out of the house. And during the inquest that was held in Florida after his death, all that came out about when they came in, where they were in the kitchen, what they did, etc. And I don't believe there's anything unusual. I've mapped it all out, in very intricate detail of those noises and the alarms on it, and then of course Alexandra coming in and finding him and screaming, and that it's really chilling to listen to. It's not a TV crime show murder. It's a real life death of somebody, and it's quite touching.
Okay, because like I said, I've always been under the assumption that he was killed.
Yeah. Well, that to put that story out there allows people to paint him in a nefarious light, that he had information that he that they didn't want to have revealed. Well, he had no such information. He was led down a path with Willem Oltmans. He had had electric shock treatment in the couple years before his death. I mean, the poor man was really at his wit's end by that point. He was derelict. He had little money, etc. 4 failed marriages. I mean, it was a sad state of affairs.
Well, didn't Oltmans get him some sort of financial backing from the Netherlands or something?
Well, it was supposed to come, right? But when he got him over there to the Netherlands, Mohrenschildt starts reneging on all the stuff that he's told Oltmans. Okay. Oh. When he realizes there's a contract in front of him and he's got to sign his name to it and admit to all these things that he's been spinning around Oltmans, who has been leading him with a storyline. Then he reneges, and that's when he runs away and goes to his old Polish friend to help him get out of the pickle that he's gotten himself into. And he helps him write up a little 1-page summary of what had happened, and then helps him get back to Florida.
And it's ironic that Oltmans plays him in the movie JFK.
Well, that's kind of sick in my perspective. It's there's no end to how some people will make money. Okay, and that's one of them.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry, I got like Johnny. Johnny's all passionate about his topic, and I'm pretty passionate about mine.
Well, that's why I brought you in, because Gary has made some statements about Mohrenschildt, and I wanted to hear your perspective. So that's good. All right. Well, we're getting on to about 3 hours. I've just got a couple of sort of generic questions. Firstly, Gary, Tim, what's the one witness? What's the one witness that or either of you or both of you, that you've spoken to, dead or alive, over all of these decades, that has absolutely nailed it for you, that really, gave you enlightening information, real nuggets, something to really work with?
Oh man, that is a loaded question.
Gary certainly many more people. And I don't want to answer for him, but I think it would be Jim Lavelle, who said Oswald would have never been convicted in a court of law with the evidence we had at the time.
And again, Jim went to his grave believing he was guilty. Not full of nuggets of information, but interviewing Marianne Moorman, James Tague, probably more than anything else would have been Madeline Brown.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Because Madeline, you know, she not only knew LBJ, but she knew how the politics of, you know, Texas worked. You know, she knew the Hunt family. She knew the Murchison family. You know, and like I said, Madeline, so many people have tried to discredit her, and unlike Helen Markham that changed her story every time, Madeline and Mary Ann have never changed their story. Jean Hill changed her story all the time. Jean Hill wanted the fame, the recognition. Mary Ann never wanted that. But you know, probably I would say Madeline would be one of the top ones that just, I don't know, blew me away, so to speak. I mean, she just, you know, Tim and I spent a lot of time talking with Judith Baker this past November, and a lot of people put her off as a fraud. And Judith has too much documentation, too much proof to be a complete fraud. Now, do I think she embellishes the love affair with Lee Harvey Oswald a little too much? I do. I think to Lee, that was just another notch in his belt. You know, being able to have sex with a 19-year-old college student, but you know, I don't dismiss Judith as a total fraud, because again, she has way too much documentation.
And I just want to comment on Madeline Brown. Obviously, she's been with LBJ for a long time. She's at the party that night. He says to her when they come out of the room behind closed doors, "After tomorrow, the Kennedys will never bother me again." She's upset by the statement, but she doesn't press him because he's known to have a violent temper, to be a mean drunk. She doesn't know his state of mind. So she sleeps on it. And the next morning asks him again about the comment. And he says again, he repeats the same comment. "The Kennedys will never bother me again after today." And what more do you need? I mean, that's what tips it over.
What about the housekeeper at the Murchison house? You interviewed her, didn't you, Gary?
I interviewed the seamstress.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. The seamstress. Now she hasn't inserted herself into this thing in any way, has she at all? Is she a very legitimate?
Yeah,
witness?
I mean, her role was she was there because she wanted to learn how to make a certain dish that they were serving earlier that evening. So she stayed for the entire party to basically help clean up and everything. What's her name? God, can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I will in a second. But you know, I found her to be very credible. She also elaborated on the chauffeur that had to go out to, I think it was Redbird Airport to pick up Hoover. You know, like I said, I find them to be very credible, just like I found Ricky White to be very credible. And again, in the court of public opinion and the way the press has manipulated these people to make them look like they're unbelievable, these people have no reason to lie about what they witnessed and what they did. I mean, where does it benefit them? I mean, you know, like Nancy was talking, George Mohrenschildt, you know, died basically penniless after, you know, being somewhat wealthy. You know, Madeline was never rich. Ricky's never been rich. How are they benefiting from telling the truth? You know, Roger Craig, same way. I never got to meet Roger, unfortunately, but you know, I have met his son. But again, why would these people lie about all these different things?
Okay, all right. Well, and so what's the future holding for you guys? What's next? What are you researching now?
Well, we're looking at a book, possibly on RFK and MLK, and we're also looking at a book of possibly about Operation Mockingbird, how the CIA and the media have spread all these lies about high-profile cases, like the Robert Kennedy assassination, John F. Kennedy's plane crash, Princess Diana, the Atlanta child murders in the 80s, 9/11, Waco, Ruby Ridge. So we're looking into a couple different options. And right now we're working on our documentary film to go along with JFK Marked for Death, because we do a documentary film on each one, and so we're working on that too.
Okay, well, that sounds really fascinating. All right, does anybody else want to make any contribution or ask any questions before we let these guys go? Joe, you still on? Joe Bax, you still on the call?
Hello, yes, what's up?
Joe, I saw that thing on the Ed Forum about the act, Justice for Kennedy Act. Do you want to just quickly comment on that for those people that don't know?
There's a congressman in Arizona who has a bill that is trying to address some of the issues that Larry Schneff and the Mary Farrell Foundation lawsuit are bringing up. But it's a 5-page bill. It's very simplistic. It's written by someone who has no clue what he's doing, no knowledge of the issues of the case, of declassification of the intelligence agencies involved, the problems we've been having with NARA. It's very simplistic, as though here's a magic wand, here's the magic bill, it'll solve everything. It won't. We need something far more competent and knowledgeable and detailed than this bill. So that's just my humble opinion. I wish, we had a detailed bill with that as you read it, the author has done his homework, which you don't get from reading this bill at all. This is just laughable, silly. So it's far from being what it's being advertised as. But who knows?
Well, when the HCSA was finished, they recommended to the Justice Department that they continue to look into the assassination. Nothing's ever happened.
Right. The Republicans and Ronald Reagan came in and they spent their time and money trying to discredit the acoustical evidence and whatnot. And one of those people is Rudy Giuliani. He was a young lawyer in the Justice Department.
Well, I've also maintained they could release the rest of the records now. It's not going to change one thing. There's going to be nothing earth-shaking in there. There aren't going to be any revelations.
I disagree on that.
So heavily redacted or eliminated by now, nothing's going to matter. So if any of us who have researched for decades now think there's going to be something illuminating in there, don't hold your breath.
Well, we disagree on that. There's a lot of homework that you have to do. You have to actually read the documents that they come out with. So it's going to be a long, hard slog, but I don't hold any high hopes with this bill.
No, I don't either.
Okay, all right. Well, let's wrap it up there. So thank you very much, guys, for giving us 3 hours of your time today.
Very well.
I thought it was a really quite an interesting discussion across the board with lots of different areas that we covered. So once again, Innocence of Oswald is Gary's original book, which has been updated with 3 new chapters, one on the Paynes, one on the single bullet magic bullet theory, which we all know where that chapter is going to go, and there's one on Johnson as well, isn't there? And his
more about Johnson and Henry Luce and C.D. Jackson, Time Life.
Yes. And then of course there is Marked for Death, which as I said at the beginning, all the various entities. We didn't really actually get deep into the FBI or CIA, funnily enough, on this call, but they're also included in this. I think the one big takeout is there's about 1 page on Oswald.
Yeah.
Two paragraphs.
Yeah.
So we know what the position of the authors is on that. So thank you very much. Please stay. One other thing
Neil, hang on. Just one thing about the book, the cover of the book.
Yeah.
That's JFK's favorite picture of himself.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yep.
And where is that? Is that in Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard?
Hyannis Port.
Yeah, Hyannis Port.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. because that's a nice photo with little John, isn't it?
It is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right, guys. Well, please stay in touch with us. Maybe we call upon your services in the future if you're prepared to do something for us. It's the 60th. We've got a thing in York which won't be streamed and won't include any remote speakers in May, but we are doing our 60th end of September, beginning of October. We're doing it before the whole November, dog and pony show in Dallas because of the, it being the 60th. So, maybe we can get you back.
It'd be awesome.
Anytime.
All right. Thanks very much. And
Will
just
there
one
be a
other thing.
meeting in March?
Well, I'm supposed to be getting Robert and Janet Groden for March, Nancy.
Okay.
So we talk about films and movies and so forth, and hope to bring that to fruition. If not, I'll go for a contingency.
Thank you.
Okay, and there was one other thing I was going to say. Yeah, there was a new member that joined us today, Peter Trudel. Thank you for joining the society.
Welcome, Peter.
Okay. All right, guys. Have a nice evening.
All right.
Thanks
See
a
you.
lot, Barry. Thanks, Tim.
Bye now.
Bye.